A poor farmer finds a wealthy heiress lost in the forest. He takes her home and makes a daring choice. What happens next changes their lives forever. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Jake Miller pushed open the barn door with a grunt, the forceful wind nearly tearing it from his calloused hands. Outside, the Oregon sky was a churning mass of dark grey clouds, and the torrential rain pounded the tin roof like a furious drumbeat. Jake's faded baseball cap did little to shield him from the downpour, but he had no choice. The family farm, what was left of it, depended on his vigilance. He was 42, tall and broad-shouldered from years of physical labor, with light brown hair peppered by early flecks of gray. His face bore the sun-baked lines of a man who had toiled outdoors his entire life. Inside the barn, his horses stomped nervously, ears pinned back as thunder rumbled. "Easy there, Ranger," Jake murmured, stepping inside to calm his favorite horse. Ranger was a chestnut gelding with a white blaze on his forehead, Jake's companion since his mother passed away 2 years ago. He offered the horse a reassuring stroke, trying to mask his own unease about the savage storm. Lightning briefly illuminated the horizon. In that electric flash, Jake caught sight of something out by the fence line that didn't belong, a shape slumped near the edge of the woods where the pine trees swayed dangerously. For a moment, he assumed it was a broken fence post or a tree limb, but when the lightning flared again, he realized it looked more like a person. "Lord," he breathed, grabbing his flashlight and hurrying out into the squall. The mud pulled at his worn boots, every step an effort against the relentless wind. Drawing closer, he made out the figure of a woman lying on her side, drenched and unconscious. Her clothes, though spattered with mud, appeared expensive. She had dark hair slicked to her head, a nasty cut on her temple, and her skin looked alarmingly pale. Dropping to one knee, Jake checked for a pulse. Relief flooded him when he felt the faint but steady beat. "Hey!" he called, his voice nearly lost to the wind. "Mom, can you hear me?" She didn't respond. Gathering her into his arms, Jake struggled back across the flooded yard toward his pickup truck. Water gushed around his ankles, and he nearly slipped on the slick grass. Finally, he managed to ease her into the passenger seat. The moment he turned the ignition, the windshield wipers fought valiantly against the torrent of rain. Jake cast her a worried glance as he drove the short distance to his farmhouse. He lived alone since his mom died, the property having been in the family for 3 generations. Lately, the farm had been falling on hard times, debts piling up, equipment breaking down. Hardly a place for unexpected guests, let alone a mysterious stranger found in a storm. Once inside, Jake laid the woman on the couch. The house was modest, just 1 bedroom plus a tiny guest room, a cramped living area, and a kitchen that doubled as a dining space. He flipped on a single lamp, revealing peeling wallpaper and patched-up wooden floors. He rarely noticed the shabby condition anymore, but seeing her here made him suddenly conscious of everything. She stirred slightly, mumbling incoherently. Jake hurried to the kitchen and fetched a clean dish towel, pressing it gently against the cut on her temple. "Hang on, just a minute," he whispered. He felt oddly nervous, heart pounding as if he were the one injured. He rushed to his old rotary phone on the wall, but the line was dead, knocked out by the storm. Cell coverage was notoriously bad this far into the countryside. That was no help either. Gritting his teeth, Jake realized he'd have to handle this alone for now. He grabbed his first aid kit from the bathroom, cleaned the wound as best he could, and covered it with a bandage. Minutes crawled by as he waited to see if she'd wake. The thunder rattled the windows, and he moved to stuff an old towel beneath the front door, where water was seeping in. Exhausted, he finally sat in a battered armchair, never taking his eyes off the woman. Who was she? He recalled the brief news segment on the radio earlier that day about a missing person, but no names had been mentioned. Storm warnings had taken priority over everything else. He wondered if it was somehow connected, though a missing tourist or traveler wasn't uncommon in these parts once the weather turned ugly. Glancing back at her face, he was struck by the delicateness of her features, sharp cheekbones, thick lashes. She didn't belong out in the woods during the worst storm he had seen in years. A chill prickled at the back of his neck as realization set in. This wasn't just a matter of helping a stranger. Something bigger was at play. And whether he liked it or not, his life had just collided with hers in a way neither of them could have predicted. The next morning, the storm had mostly passed, leaving behind a grey, overcast sky and puddles large enough to drown Jake's backyard boots. He rose at dawn, more out of habit than choice, stepping quietly into the living room. The woman still lay on the couch, sleeping fitfully. He noticed her skin had regained a little color. Carefully, he placed a fresh glass of water on the coffee table beside her. He busied himself making breakfast, scrambled eggs, a couple slices of bacon, even if she couldn't eat right away. He wanted something warm ready. The hiss and pop of bacon in the cast-iron skillet filled the kitchen, mingling with the comforting smell of coffee. Suddenly, he heard a soft moan. Turning around, he saw her eyelids flutter. "Ma'am?" he asked gently, coming closer. She looked at him, confusion flickering in her dark eyes. "Where am I?" she croaked. Her voice was hoarse, either from the cold or stress. "You're at my farm," he said, trying to keep his tone calm and reassuring. "I'm Jake Miller. Found you last night during the storm. You were unconscious near the edge of my property." Her gaze swept around the small living area, the worn furniture, faded family photos on the wall, a crocheted throw blanket that had once belonged to Jake's mother. Thank you," she managed. A trembling hand lifted to touch the bandage on her temple. "Did you take care of this?" He nodded, stepping back to give her space. "I'm no doctor, but I did my best. I'd have taken you to the hospital, but with the storm, the roads were too dangerous." He hesitated. "You got a name?" She parted her lips as though to answer, but something in her expression shifted, like she was weighing whether to trust him. Finally, she swallowed hard and said, "I'm Sophia." Sophia Blackwood. Jake didn't immediately recognize the last name, though it sounded faintly familiar. "Well, nice to meet you, Sophia. Are you hurt anywhere besides your head?" She gingerly tested her limbs, rotating an ankle and bending her knees. "I feel banged up," she admitted, "but I don't think anything's broken." He nodded. "I've got some eggs and bacon in the kitchen if you're hungry." She tried to sit up, wincing a little. "That would be nice." "Thank you." He helped her into the small kitchen, pulling out a chair at the old oak table. Sophia's eyes traced over the unadorned walls, the scuffed linoleum floor. Everything here spoke of a simple, unpretentious life. She noticed a newspaper clipping pinned to the fridge about local farm closures, perhaps a sign of the difficulties folks were facing in this region. "Were you driving somewhere last night?" Jake asked, setting a plate in front of her. "Your clothes looked pretty fancy for a camping trip." She cast a wary glance at him. "I was on the road. I guess my car must have skidded off somewhere. I don't remember much after losing control on a muddy turn." She paused. "I needed to get away from something." He studied her quietly, sensing a story beneath her guarded words. Yet he didn't push. He'd never been one to pry. "That storm was a bad one," he finally said, trying to ease her comfort. "Worst I've seen in years. It's a wonder I found you in time." She reached for the glass of water, her hand trembling. "I'm grateful, really. If there's some way I can repay you." Jake raised a hand. "Let's just focus on getting you well first." Before he could say more, the screen door creaked. Ben Carter, Jake's friend and local mechanic, appeared in the doorway. He was a stocky man in his mid-40s, a grease-stained cap, perched on his head. He paused, eyebrows shooting up at the sight of Sophia. "Morning," Ben greeted, a hint of curiosity in his voice. "Hope I'm not interrupting." Jake waved him in. "It's fine. Sophia, this here is Ben, my oldest friend. Ben, meet Sophia. She had an accident last night." Ben nodded politely. "Mom," Sophia managed a small smile. "Nice to meet you." Ben turned his gaze to Jake, speaking in a low tone. "I came by to see if you weathered the storm all right. Heard on the radio about someone missing in these parts. Figured I'd check up on you." Jake tensed slightly. He recalled hearing that same report, though no name had been given. "Yeah, I'm okay. Roof took a little beating, but not too bad." He noticed Ben's pointed glance towards Sophia. "She's, just resting up for a bit. Might need to get her car from the ditch once the road's clear." Ben shrugged, scratching the back of his neck. "Well, if you need a tow, let me know. I can come out with the pickup." The conversation remained polite, but Jake sensed 1,000 unspoken questions swirling behind Ben's friendly eyes. He hoped he could handle them later, away from Sophia's earshot. As Ben left, Sophia's gaze lowered. She seemed to sense the tension. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I know this is an inconvenience." Jake shook his head. "Life around here is nothing if not unpredictable. You stay as long as you need to heal. I'll try to phone the sheriff if the line's working again, or we can drive into town once the roads dry up a bit." Sophia nodded, a faint resignation in her expression. "All right," she murmured. But there was an unmistakable shadow of worry behind her eyes, as though she feared what awaited her if she left this little farmhouse safety net too soon. Jake spent the rest of the day balancing his usual chores with keeping an eye on Sophia. The storm had turned his vegetable garden into a swamp, and he had fences to mend. He noticed her watching from the window as he fought with a hammer and some nails, trying to reattach loose boards. Occasionally, she'd offer to help, but he insisted she rest. As evening approached, he noticed the tension never left Sophia's eyes. She'd jump at every creak of the house or distant roll of thunder. He figured she was still shaken from her accident, but something else seemed to trouble her, something deeper than just physical pain. After dinner, simple chicken soup he cooked on the old stovetop, he found her in the living room. She was sitting on the couch, hugging her knees. Her dark hair fell loosely around her face, and she wore one of his mother's old sweaters he'd offered earlier. The hem nearly reached her thighs. "Mind if I join you?" Jake asked softly, carrying 2 mugs of tea. She looked up, offering a small smile. "Please." He handed her a mug and settled into the old armchair across from her. The soft glow of a table lamp gave the room a warm but slightly melancholic feel. "So," he began, gently blowing on his tea, "you remember anything more about last night? Like where exactly you were headed or where your car might be?" She pursed her lips, setting her gaze on the steam rising from her cup. "The details are fuzzy. I was driving. I just knew I had to get out of Seattle, away from—" Her voice trailed off. "Hey," Jake said, holding her gaze. "I'm not here to pry. But if you want to talk, I'll listen." She hesitated, then exhaled a trembling breath. "I was leaving a complicated situation," she said carefully. "My family, my father in particular, expected me to do something I wasn't ready for. And I panicked. I just got in the car and drove." Jake nodded thoughtfully, choosing his words with care. "Sometimes you got to do what's right for you. That can be hard, especially if others don't see it that way." Sophia's eyes flashed with gratitude. "That's exactly it. I just felt cornered." She looked away, fingers fiddling with the mug handle. "Thank you for not pushing too hard for details. Right now, I'm not ready to share everything." "I respect that," Jake replied, sipping his tea. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken fears. Finally, he tried to lighten the mood. "I'll let you in on a little farm secret. If you hear a bunch of strange noises tonight, it's probably just the pipes or the wind in the rafters. This place can sound like a haunted house after a big storm." Sophia managed a timid laugh. "Thanks for the warning. I'm already on edge, so every noise has me jumping out of my skin." Jake gave a reassuring smile. "You're safe here, all right? This old house might creak, but it's stood for a good 100 years. And I doubt any scary creature could wade through all that mud outside." She nodded, relaxing a fraction. "You've been more than kind. I know I keep saying it, but thank you." Before Jake could respond, a crackle broke the silence. The radio on the kitchen counter. Static rose and fell, mingling with the faint hiss of leftover storm winds outside. Over the white noise, a reporter's voice emerged, listing local storm damage. Then came a brief mention. "In other news, the search continues for a missing Seattle woman, last seen driving south on I-5. Authorities are asking for any information." Jake tensed, eyes flicking to Sophia. She seemed to hold her breath. He reached over to turn the volume down. "That's enough for one night," he said quietly. Sophia swallowed hard, her expression distant. "Missing Seattle woman. It sounds like it might be me." She tried to smile, but it fell short. Jake's jaw clenched as a sense of responsibility washed over him. "All right," he said gently. "I'll try calling the sheriff in the morning, see if the phone line's back. If not, we can drive into town in a day or two. That'll give you time to rest up." Her eyes darted nervously. "Thank you," she whispered. He recognized the fear in her voice. She seemed torn between wanting to do the right thing, turning herself in or informing her family she was safe, and an overwhelming desire to remain hidden. Jake didn't have all the pieces of her story, but he felt the weight of her dilemma. He knew, deep down, that this situation was more complicated than a simple rescue. The storm, it seemed, had only been the beginning. That night, as he lay awake in his bedroom, listening to the gentle patter of leftover rain on the roof, Jake couldn't shake a sense of unease. He'd always followed a moral code: honesty and hard work. Yet, now, he questioned whether helping Sophia in her secrecy might land him in deeper trouble than he ever imagined. Early the next day, Jake headed out to the porch, coffee mug in hand, hoping to see if the telephone lines were restored. The yard remained a soggy mess, with puddles reflecting the dull morning light. Carefully, he dialed the sheriff's office on his landline, but the connection crackled, then dropped dead. He muttered a curse under his breath and hung up. Returning inside, he found Sophia in the kitchen, attempting to help by washing the few breakfast dishes. She looked up, cheeks slightly flushed. "The water's not draining well." "I'm sorry, I think I used too much soap." Jake let a slow smile rise to his face. "No worries. The plumbing's older than me. Here, let me give it a tap." He approached the sink, fiddling with the handle until the sluggish drain finally cooperated. Sophia dried her hands, glancing around. "I'd be happy to help more. Cook, clean, something. I don't want to be a burden." Jake hesitated. He appreciated the offer, but concern tugged at him. Keeping her presence a secret felt wrong, and yet the idea of turning her over to authorities without understanding her situation troubled him more. "We'll manage," he said softly. "But hey, if you feel up to it, maybe we can check on the animals together." Outside, the air carried a damp chill. Clouds still lingered overhead, threatening more rain. Jake led Sophia to the barn, explaining each stall's occupant with quiet pride. "Here's Ranger," he said, patting his horse's neck. "You remember him from last night, I guess." Sophia reached out tentatively, letting Ranger sniff her palm. "He's beautiful," she said, smiling when the horse nuzzled her fingers. The moment felt peaceful, almost normal, as though they were simply two people going about a daily routine. Their respite was short-lived. Suddenly, the crunch of tires on gravel announced an unexpected visitor. Jake turned to see an older pickup rolling into the yard. He recognized the official seal on the door. Tom Patterson, the county sheriff, was making his rounds. Panic flared in Sophia's eyes. She shrank back behind the barn door. Jake swallowed hard, turning to her. "Stay put," he whispered. "I'll handle this." Stepping into the open, Jake waved, striving for a casual tone. "Morning, Sheriff." Tom Patterson, a tall man in his 50s with a neatly trimmed mustache, returned the greeting, eyes sweeping over the property. "Morning, Jake. Storm do you much damage?" Jake forced a friendly shrug. "A bit. Fence is busted in a couple places. Lost some shingles off the roof, but nothing we can't fix." The sheriff nodded. "Good to hear. Mind if I come in for a moment?" "Figured I'd check on folks, see if anyone needs a hand." Jake's stomach tightened. "Sure, but, it's a bit messy." Tom laughed, stepping out of his truck. "I've seen worse." Then his gaze flickered toward the barn. "You got company, Jake?" Jake scratched his head. "Just me and the animals, mostly. A friend stopped by earlier, but he's gone now." The sheriff glanced around, unconvinced, but didn't press. "All right, well, I won't take too much of your time. Town's all stirred up about this missing woman from Seattle. Family's putting up a reward if anyone's seen her." Jake's heart pounded so loud he was sure Tom could hear it. "Yeah, I heard something on the radio. Don't know the details, though." Tom sighed. "Name's Sophia Blackwood. Her father's some big-shot businessman up north. They're worried sick." He peered at Jake, as if trying to gauge any reaction. "She went missing around the same time that storm hit. Figured I'd stop by local farms, see if anyone spotted a stranded motorist." Jake swallowed, doing his best to keep calm. "Haven't seen anybody out this way," he lied, pulse racing. "Then again, you know how heavy that rain was. Could hardly see past my own front yard." Tom nodded slowly, crossing his arms. "Sure. Well, if you do hear or see anything, let me know. Not often we get big rewards thrown around." "You could help a struggling farmer, if you catch my drift." Jake plastered a faint smile on his face. "I'll keep that in mind." With that, Tom bid farewell and climbed back into his pickup. As the sheriff drove off, Jake exhaled shakily. He felt a twist in his gut, part guilt, part anxiety. Sophia emerged from behind the barn door, her expression grim. "I heard him mention the reward," she whispered. "Jake, I can't stay here if it's going to cause trouble for you." "I can't let you lie to the sheriff on my account." Jake looked into her eyes, seeing a swirl of fear and resolve. "I don't care about the trouble." "Well," he admitted with a sigh, "that's not entirely true. But I'm not turning you in until I know you're ready to face whatever you're running from. You understand?" Tears glistened on her lashes as she nodded. "I do." And in that moment, Jake knew he was risking more than just a brush with the law. He was risking his conscience, his livelihood, everything. But something about Sophia's vulnerability, the raw honesty in her eyes, compelled him forward. Right or wrong, he couldn't abandon her now. That evening, a restless hush settled over the farmhouse. The wind had died, but remnants of storm clouds still loomed, casting shifting shadows across the yard. Jake sat at the kitchen table, an untouched mug of coffee in front of him. Across from him sat Sophia, arms folded protectively around herself as though bracing for a new storm. "I need to figure out a plan," she murmured. "I can't keep hiding like this forever. It's not fair to you." Jake raked a hand through his short hair, the stress evident in his posture. He'd managed to keep the truth from the sheriff earlier, but he couldn't pretend it didn't weigh on him. "If your family is searching, they'll eventually look this way again." Sheriff Patterson doesn't miss much, especially when there's a reward on the line. Sophia flinched at the mention of the reward. I hate that it puts you in a bad spot. If I'd known how complicated this would be. She bit her lip, then exhaled a long breath. But I can't go back to Seattle. Not yet. Jake sensed a deep-seated turmoil in her words. You mentioned your father had plans for you. Some arranged marriage or something like that. Her gaze dropped to her hands. His business empire depends on certain alliances. Marrying Andrew Green was supposed to cement a merger. It's not love. It's a transaction. Jake's jaw tightened. That's awful. No wonder you ran. She shrugged helplessly. He wouldn't listen to my objections. I felt cornered. Her eyes shone with frustration. But now, by staying here, I'm cornering you too. He leaned forward, voice quiet but firm. Listen, I can't claim to understand corporate deals or arranged engagements, but I do know the feeling of being trapped. This farm, my debts, the sense of obligation, it can choke you sometimes. But that doesn't mean you just hand over your life to someone else's demands. Sophia blinked back tears. You could benefit from the reward, you know. I've seen those overdue bills on your counter. I could even pay you directly. Maybe that would help your farm. His cheeks warmed with a mix of embarrassment and indignation. I'm not after your money, and I wouldn't be able to look myself in the mirror if I took you back to your father against your will. Silence stretched between them. Finally, she spoke in a trembling voice. Then what do we do? Before Jake could answer, a knock sounded at the door. He darted a glance at Sophia, then rose to answer. Cracking the door open, he saw Maggie Hollister, the 65-year-old neighbor who had known his family forever. Her lined face wore an expression of concern. Jake, everything all right? She asked gently. Heard the sheriff was making rounds? Jake beckoned her inside, trusting Maggie's discretion. Come on in. There's someone I'd like you to meet. When Sophia came forward, Maggie didn't show shock, only a subtle lift of her brows, then a kind smile. Hello, dear. I'm Maggie, Jake's neighbor. Sophia's polite nod couldn't hide her nervousness. Nice to meet you. Maggie glanced between them, sensing the tension. I'm guessing you're the one the radio's been talking about. The missing woman from Seattle? Sophia stiffened, but nodded. Maggie sighed. Well, I won't pry into your reasons. I'm sure you have them. I just wanted to offer some support. If you two need extra supplies or someone to distract the sheriff, you can count on me. Jake felt a wave of relief. Thank you, Maggie. It means a lot. The older woman nodded. I've lived long enough to know that life isn't always black and white. Sometimes helping a stranger is the best thing you can do. But be careful, Jake. The family offering that reward is powerful. You don't want to get on their bad side. After Maggie left, Sophia seemed both heartened by the neighbor's kindness and worried about the risk. That woman barely knows me, and she's willing to help. That's how folks are around here, Jake replied quietly. We look out for each other. Sometimes it's all we have. They returned to the table, the coffee now cold. The flicker of a single overhead light cast long shadows on the walls. It felt as though the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. Jake cleared his throat. If you really want to stay hidden for a little while, we can, but it's your call. I won't force you to do anything. You can leave, or we can try to fix your car, though if anyone sees your license plate, word might spread. Either way, we have to decide soon. Sophia rubbed her temples, eyes full of indecision. I don't know, Jake. My heart says stay, but my mind, I'm afraid of the lies, the risk. He reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand over hers. We'll figure it out. You're not alone in this. For a moment, her eyes fluttered shut, and Jake sensed the weight of her relief. and her fear. A single tear escaped, rolling down her cheek. In that instant, the unspoken bond between them solidified. They were two souls pushed together by circumstance, both searching for a path out of their troubles. Outside, another gust of wind rattled the window. Inside, their vacillating decision lingered, full of promise and danger alike. Together, they stood on the cusp of a journey that would challenge their moral compasses and test the limits of their hearts. Dawn broke with a soft mist clinging to the pasture, lending the early morning an otherworldly hush. Jake, already up to tend to the animals, poked his head into the small guest room to check on Sophia. She was awake, propped against the pillows he'd hastily arranged for her. Though she still looked tired, her color was better than when he'd first found her. "You hungry?" Jake asked, leaning against the doorframe. Sophia nodded. "Starving, actually." He smiled. "I'll make something warm. Maggie usually stops by this time of day with some fresh eggs. Maybe we'll get lucky." Almost on cue, there was a gentle knock at the back door. Jake went to let Maggie in. She was a sturdy woman of 65, with graying hair swept into a practical bun. She carried a wicker basket brimming with eggs and produce from her own garden. "Morning, Jake," Maggie greeted. Then, spotting Sophia peeking around the corner, she offered a warm smile. "And good morning to you, dear." Sophia stepped forward, self-conscious in one of Jake's old flannel shirts, sleeves rolled up awkwardly. "Good morning. Thank you for bringing these. It's very kind." Maggie waved off the gratitude. "Oh, it's nothing. Got more than I can use, and I suspect you two could use all the help you can get right now." Her tone was gentle, but her gaze was sharp enough to catch any subtle tension in the room. Jake took the basket to the counter, rummaging through it. "You're spoiling us," he teased, finding not just eggs but also tomatoes, onions, and even a small jar of homemade jam. Maggie chuckled. "I call it neighborly duty." Then she turned back to Sophia. "Jake said you'd been through quite a storm, literally and otherwise. You feeling all right?" Sophia hesitated, aware Maggie likely knew her identity. "Better, yes. It helps to feel safe here." She paused, fiddling with her shirt cuff. "But I'm still not sure what my next step should be." Maggie exchanged a meaningful glance with Jake. "Well, sometimes a little fresh air and a good day's work can help clear the mind," she advised, her eyes warm with sincerity. "Jake, maybe you can show her around the property, get her hands busy, let her see what honest labor feels like." Sophia's cheeks colored slightly, and she smiled shyly. "I'd like that." Once Maggie departed, Jake handed Sophia a pair of old work boots and led her outside. The morning sun broke through the mist, revealing rolling fields dotted with scattered fence posts. In the distance, a small herd of cows meandered, oblivious to any human drama. "I'll warn you," Jake said, striding beside her, "farming's no glamorous affair. But there's satisfaction in it, knowing you're putting real food on people's tables." Sophia took in the scenery, her dark eyes lingering on a field of wildflowers by the fence line. "I'm not sure I've ever had the chance to do something so grounded," she admitted. "I grew up in a corporate family. Everything was numbers on a screen, profits, fancy parties. It's just different." Jake nodded. "Different in a good way or bad way?" She gazed at the horizon. "So far, good. Feels real." He handed her a worn pair of work gloves. "Ready to get those boots muddy." The morning passed in slow, methodical tasks. They checked the fences for damage, hammered nails, replaced broken boards. Sophia was clumsy at first, unfamiliar with swinging a hammer, but Jake guided her hands gently. She caught on quickly, determined to be useful. Midway through, they paused for water. Jake leaned on the fence, sweat lining his brow. "You're a natural," he teased. "Better aim than I had at your age." Sophia laughed, the sound surprising both of them. She set down the hammer, glancing around the farm. I never realized this sort of work could be so therapeutic. It's a relief not to be thinking about corporate deals or the pressure of those events I used to attend. Jake's face grew serious. It might not stay calm forever. Sheriff Patterson could be back. Your father might come looking. I just want you to be prepared. She swallowed, nodding. I know. Just then, Maggie returned, pulling up in her battered pickup. She hopped out, waving them over. Jake, I've got something that might interest you both. She lifted a small crate from the truck bed. Inside was a newborn lamb, weak and shivering. Mother rejected it, Maggie explained, sorrow in her voice. Thought maybe you'd know what to do. You've always had a knack for rescuing lost things. Her words hung in the air, a poignant echo of how Jake had found Sophia. Carefully, Sophia took the lamb, cradling it in her arms. She felt the tiny creature's heart flutter against her chest and glanced up at Maggie. I'll help, Sophia said softly. I'll do whatever's needed. Jake smiled gently at the sight. We'll bottle feed it, keep it warm. Should pull through if we're consistent. As they led the lamb toward the barn, Maggie observed the scene with a knowing expression. This was more than just about an abandoned animal. It was about nurturing hope in the face of fragility. Sophia, effectively in hiding, and Jake, weighed down by financial woes, found themselves united in caring for something helpless and new. Maggie's voice was quiet, almost reverent. Seems to me you two have a lot to learn from each other. How to keep going when the odds are stacked. She gave a nod to both, then climbed back in her truck. I'll be back to check on you all soon. As the truck rumbled away, Jake and Sophia exchanged a look that spoke volumes. Together, they were forging an unspoken bond, a shared mission to protect the vulnerable, be it a lone lamb or the woman Jake had rescued in the storm. They were stepping beyond mere shelter and sympathy, entering a realm of mutual learning and trust. For the first time since her arrival, Sophia accompanied Jake into town. The paved road was still slick with leftover rain, and evidence of the recent storm lingered in fallen branches and pooling water along the shoulders. They traveled in Jake's old pickup truck, its engine rumbling with a soothing familiarity. Won't people recognize me? She asked apprehensively, glancing out the window at the farmland slipping by. Jake's gaze stayed fixed on the road. Doubtful. There's not much reason for your face to be known around here, unless you've been on TV or something, and folks are used to new faces passing through. We'll keep a low profile. They parked near Ben Carter's auto shop, a small corrugated metal building that served as the town's prime mechanic station. The sign above read, Carter's Repairs. Ben was standing outside, wiping grease from his hands, when they stepped out of the truck. Hey, Jake, Sophia, he greeted, his tone friendly but guarded. Heard you might drop by. Sophia forced a smile. She could sense the weight of unspoken questions in Ben's gaze. I appreciate the help, she managed. Ben nodded, motioning them inside where it was quieter. Tools hung on the walls, and the concrete floor was stained with years of oil leaks. Jake told me you might need a set of wheels, or at least get your car pulled out of that ditch, Ben said, studying Sophia carefully. Is that still the plan? Sophia exchanged a nervous glance with Jake. I'm not sure yet. My car might connect me to everything I left behind, but if the sheriff finds it, he'll know I'm here. Ben shrugged. I can store it on the far side of my lot discreetly, but eventually you'll want to do something with it, sell it or fix it up. Jake placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We've got time to decide. We just wanted to see if it was salvageable. While Ben went to gather some paperwork, Sophia wandered around the shop, noticing the battered radio in the corner quietly playing country music. The same news station from Jake's farmhouse crackled through the speakers. Once more, she heard a mention of a missing Seattle woman. She felt a pang of anxiety. Jake stepped up beside her, lowering his voice. "You okay?" She forced another shaky smile. "Just hearing about the search. It's unnerving." Before Jake could respond, Ben returned with a note. "Got the towing receipt from last night? I had some guys pull your car from the ditch at first light. Didn't want to leave it out there. It's safe now, but it does have damage. Broken headlight, bent fender. Good news is it's fixable." Sophia looked at the piece of paper with an uneasy frown. "Thank you. I owe you for that." Ben waved a hand. "We'll figure out the tab later. Right now, let's keep it under wraps. Folks in town might ask questions, especially with all the news about your disappearance." A twinge of guilt pricked at her. "I hate hiding like this," she whispered. "It feels dishonest." Jake spoke gently. "I know. But you're not ready to face your father yet, are you?" Sophia's shoulders sagged. "No," she admitted. "Not if it means walking back into that arrangement." Ben cleared his throat, sensing the tension. "Look, if you need an excuse, we can say you're a friend of Jake's from out of state. That's normal enough, I guess. Just steer clear of the sheriff for a bit." She nodded, though the weight on her chest persisted. Hiding was one thing, lying to an entire community was another, but she reminded herself it was temporary, just until she figured out what to do about her father's demands. Jake and Sophia left the shop, strolling down the small main street. The town was modest. A single diner, a gas station, a rundown convenience store. A few townspeople nodded politely at Jake, and he returned their greetings. Nobody seemed especially curious about Sophia, but she still felt like every eye was on her. When they reached the diner, a handwritten sign on the door read, "Morning Special, $4.99 breakfast." Jake pulled open the door, the bell tinkling overhead. "Thought you might like a real cup of coffee," he said with a half-smile. Inside, vinyl booths lined the walls, and the smell of bacon grease clung to the air. A waitress with a tired smile approached. "Morning, Jake. Table for two?" They settled into a booth. Sophia marveled at the normalcy of the scene, the swirl of voices, the clank of dishes. She realized she'd barely been around other people since that stormy night. Now, she was stepping out of her hiding place, and though it filled her with nerves, it also brought a strange comfort. Jake, reading her expression, reached across the table and gently patted her hand. "You good." She exhaled slowly. "Yeah, I think so." The waitress returned with menus, but Sophia barely glanced at hers. Instead, she surveyed the diner's patrons, a group of older men in flannel shirts discussing local crop yields, a middle-aged woman reading the local newspaper, and a young mother trying to placate a fussy toddler. None of them gave her more than a passing glance. "It's so different here," Sophia murmured. "People just live their lives without all that hustle and pressure I'm used to." Jake nodded. "We've got our own problems, but yeah, it's a slower pace. Doesn't mean we don't have big hearts, though. If folks here knew you were in trouble, most of them would help in a heartbeat." A fragile smile touched her lips. "I can see that. Makes me feel guilty about lying." Jake sighed, softly enough that only she could hear. "We'll tell the truth when you're ready. For now, let's just get through breakfast." She nodded, deciding that for this moment at least, she'd allow herself a fragment of normalcy. As the waitress poured coffee and the hum of conversation enveloped them, Sophia realized she was truly taking her first steps away from her old life, a life she had never chosen. Here, she might find the courage to decide her own fate. That afternoon, Jake drove Sophia to the far end of his property, beyond the rolling fields, where a thick line of pine trees divided his land from a steep ravine. Unlike the cozy farmhouse area, this portion of the terrain felt wild, untamed. Sophia stepped out of the truck, squinting at the sun filtering through the canopy. "You own all this?" she asked in awe, her voice echoing among the tall trunks. Jake nodded, though a shadow passed over his face. "My grandfather did. It's been in the family a long time. It's the only inheritance I got. Well, that and a mountain of debt." They walked together, the thick pine needles crunching underfoot. Occasionally, a startled bird would flap away, leaves rustling overhead. Sophia found the forest both beautiful and intimidating. The hush here was different from the farmland. This was nature's realm, indifferent to human affairs. Jake paused by a large fallen log. "Growing up, I used to come here when life got tough. My mother's illness, my father's absence. I found solace under these trees." He ran a hand across the log's mossy surface. "There's something about this place that makes you feel closer to what really matters." Sophia nodded, inhaling the crisp scent of pine. She understood that longing for solitude, that need to escape. "I can see why you'd come here," she said softly. "It's peaceful." A fleeting smile crossed Jake's face. "Listen, if you need space to think or just get away from the house, you're welcome to come here any time. Nobody else ever wanders this far. You'll have privacy." Something about his gesture touched her deeply. "Thank you. You barely know me, and yet you've given me shelter, shared your food, and now, your secret hideaway." He shrugged, his gaze dropping to the ground. "Maybe I do know you, in a way. I know what it feels like to be trapped." She reached out and gently touched his arm. "Jake, But her words caught in her throat. Gratitude, confusion, a swirl of feelings she wasn't ready to name. They pressed on, deeper into the woods. Sunbeams formed a patchwork of light across the forest floor. Though they didn't speak much, there was a comforting rhythm to their steps. Here, away from prying eyes, from the threat of the sheriff or her father's men, Sophia felt some of the tension in her chest ease. Eventually, they reached a small clearing where a narrow creek trickled between rocks. Jake pointed out the clusters of wild berries and a pair of deer that darted away at their approach. "I can see why you stayed with the farm," Sophia said after a while, her tone gentle. "Even with all the hardships, it's beautiful and raw." "It's life," Jake nodded, hands in his pockets. "Yeah, it's hard to imagine leaving all this. Sometimes, though, I wonder if I should sell part of the land to pay off debts. But letting go of what my family built feels like giving up a piece of myself." Sophia cast him a sympathetic look. "I wish I could help," she whispered, a pang of guilt accompanying the thought of her privileged upbringing. She'd had resources at her disposal, financial wealth that now felt like a burden. Jake noticed her troubled expression. "Don't start feeling guilty over that. We all make our way somehow. I'd rather figure out a solution on my own, or at least one that doesn't involve betraying you." At the mention of betrayal, a flicker of fear crossed her face. "You really could turn me in and claim the reward. It might solve all your financial problems." He hesitated, the thought clearly having crossed his mind before. Then he shook his head. "Money can't buy back integrity. I won't sell you out." She exhaled, relief evident in her smile. "Thank you." They followed the creek a short distance, stopping at a flat rock where the water made a gentle burbling sound. They sat side by side, legs dangling over the edge. The canopy overhead framed the sky, which had turned a brilliant blue. For a moment they were just two people sharing a quiet afternoon, the drama of missing persons and arranged marriages far removed from this tranquil spot. In that stillness, Sophia realized how drastically her world had changed. She was no longer at glamorous corporate events or overshadowed by her father's demands. She was here, sitting on a creek rock beside a man who offered kindness without conditions. A breeze whispered through the pines. Jake cleared his throat. "I should probably check on the lamb soon. See if it's feeding okay." Sophia nodded, but she felt a pang of disappointment at the thought of leaving. She cast a final glance at the creek, imprinting the scene in her mind. This was her special world, an uncharted territory of emotions and revelations. As she rose to follow Jake back to the truck, she couldn't help but wonder if she'd ever be ready to return to the life she once knew. Over the following days, Sophia settled into a tentative routine at the farmhouse. She woke early, helping Jake feed the animals and tend to the garden. She surprised herself by how quickly she adapted to the manual tasks. One morning, she stood at the chicken coop, scattering feed while a half-dozen hens pecked frantically at the ground. She wore a pair of Jake's old jeans, cinched at the waist with a borrowed belt and an oversized hoodie. Just weeks ago, her daily routine involved dressing in tailored suits and attending boardroom meetings. Now, the clucking of chickens replaced the murmur of executives. Jake approached from behind, carrying a stack of clean straw. "You all right?" he asked, noticing her momentary pause. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "It's still surreal, that's all. If someone had told me last month that I'd be shoveling straw in a chicken coop, I wouldn't have believed them." He grinned. "Life has a way of surprising us. Didn't think I'd be harboring a high society runaway either." She tossed him a playful glare. "I never said I was high society." He tilted his head, amused. "Well, you certainly aren't the typical traveler who lands at my doorstep. But you're learning fast." Indeed, she had started to find a sense of purpose in the simple chores. There was something cleansing about working with her hands, seeing immediate results, a clean stall, fed animals, fresh produce from the garden. It was a far cry from the abstract deals her old life revolved around. Later that day, Maggie stopped by to check on them, as she often did. She found Sophia kneeling in the makeshift nursery area of the barn, bottle-feeding the lamb they'd rescued. The animal was gaining strength, and Sophia had grown oddly protective of it. Maggie smiled. "You two look like old friends." Sophia gently stroked the lamb's soft head. "She's relying on us for everything. Makes me wonder how many times I've taken my own life for granted." Maggie glanced around the barn, noticing how Sophia had organized some of Jake's supplies, neatly labeled feed sacks, stacked tools in a corner. It wasn't the typical system Jake used, but it looked far more efficient. "You're quite the natural at this." Sophia shrugged shyly. "I just see things that need doing, and I do them. It feels good." Maggie nodded, her voice warm. "Sometimes the hardest part of a new life is just stepping into it. You're doing that now." Sophia's cheeks colored slightly. She looked at the older woman curiously. "Maggie, have you ever—" She hesitated. "Ever gone against everything expected of you? Risked it all for something?" Maggie's face grew somber. "A long time ago, yes. I had a fiancée my daddy approved of, but I knew it wasn't right for me. I left town for a while, tried to build a life on my own terms. Ended up back here eventually, but it wasn't an easy road." She offered Sophia a meaningful look. "But it was worth it." Sophia felt a wave of relief wash over her. "That's encouraging. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just being foolish, risking my safety and lying to everyone." Maggie placed a comforting hand on Sophia's shoulder. "It's not foolish to follow your conscience. Foolish is ignoring it." Soon after, Jake joined them, dusting off his gloves. He and Maggie spoke briefly about the upcoming county fair, though with finances tight, Jake wasn't sure he could afford to travel or present any livestock. Sophia listened, an idea forming in her mind. "What if we sold some produce or homemade crafts? Maybe I could help make jam or something to sell at a stall." Jake blinked in surprise. "That's an interesting thought. I hadn't really considered it." Maggie grinned. "This place used to be known for Mrs. Miller's preserves, if I recall correctly. People came from all around to buy them." A small smile tugged at Jake's lips, a hint of nostalgia at the mention of his mother. "Yeah, she made a mean berry jam." Sophia felt a spark of excitement. We could try reviving that idea. It might bring in a little extra income, and it'd be a good distraction. Jake rubbed the back of his neck, glancing at Maggie. You think folks would buy jam from a local booth again? Maggie's eyes danced. Absolutely. Around here, folks value homegrown, homemade goods. You make it, and I'll spread the word. A ripple of hope spread through the small group. It wasn't a grand business plan or a corporate merger, but it was tangible, something they could accomplish with their own hands. Later, as Sophia took the lamb back inside, she felt a surge of satisfaction at the thought of contributing. She wasn't just hiding anymore. She was living, adapting, finding ways to help this farm that had taken her in. And in those quiet moments of productivity, she discovered a newfound inner strength. The overwhelming fear that had gnawed at her since fleeing Seattle dulled just enough for her to appreciate the possibility of a different life, one grounded in honesty, hard work, and genuine connections. Over the next week, a subtle shift took place around the farmhouse. Maggie and Ben became not just acquaintances, but vital allies in helping maintain Sophia's secrecy. Neither ever directly acknowledged her true identity, but their subtle efforts, casual check-ins, quietly spreading cover stories about Jake's visiting cousin, allowed Sophia to move with slightly more freedom. One afternoon, Maggie invited them all over for a small luncheon at her place. Her home, a cozy cottage with a bright blue door and window boxes overflowing with geraniums, sat nestled at the edge of her property. "We can talk jam recipes," Maggie announced with a grin, leading them into her neat kitchen. A delicious aroma of homemade bread and roasted vegetables greeted them. Ben arrived soon after, tipping his cap at Sophia. "Ma'am," he said in a teasing drawl. "Or should I say, cousin from out of state?" Sophia blushed, but managed a good-natured smile. "You've all been so generous with me. I don't take it for granted." They settled around Maggie's table, passing dishes of roasted squash, fresh salad, and bread slathered with butter. Laughter flowed easily, spurred by Maggie's humor and Ben's steady stream of stories about the odd vehicles he'd repaired lately. Jake quietly observed Sophia's interactions. She seemed less guarded, more open to sharing small anecdotes from her past, although she avoided any direct mention of her wealthy upbringing. "So, your father," Ben ventured carefully at one point, his brow wrinkling. "I suppose he's not the type to give up searching easily." Sophia's eyes dimmed. "No, he's tenacious, but sometimes I wonder if it's concern for my well-being or for our family's reputation." She fiddled with a napkin, the confession hanging in the air. Jake felt a rush of sympathy. "Well, if he does come around, you'll have folks here who'll vouch for you." His tone was confident, though he was acutely aware of the risks in that statement. Maggie, sensing the heaviness, cleared her throat. "Now, about these jam recipes." She pulled a weathered notebook from a shelf. "Mrs. Miller's original instructions. I borrowed them once, years ago." She slid it across the table to Jake. He picked it up, smiling faintly. "Didn't know you still had this," Maggie shrugged. "I'm a pack rat for sentimental things. Your mother was a dear friend." Sophia peered over Jake's shoulder, reading the neat handwriting. Step-by-step guides for canning fruit preserves. It felt like opening a window into the farm's history. "We can start small," she suggested. "Maybe just enough jars to sell at the local farm stand, or that county fair you mentioned." Ben spoke up. "People love nostalgia. If you tell them these are old Miller family recipes, you'll have them lining up." A flicker of pride lit Jake's eyes. "We used to rely on small stuff like this to keep afloat. My mother never lost faith, even when bills stacked up." Maggie set down her fork. "Now enough about jam. Let's talk about you two. How are you holding up, truly?" Jake and Sophia exchanged glances. Jake cleared his throat, deciding to speak first. "It's been a whirlwind, to say the least. But I can't deny it's also been nice to have company around the farm. Usually it's just me and the animals. Sophia smiled softly. I feel like I'm learning a whole new way of life. It's strange, but I don't miss Seattle as much as I thought I would. Maggie gave a sage nod, her gaze drifting between them. You two look out for each other. All right. There's a kindness here that shouldn't be ignored. Jake's cheeks colored slightly. He shot Sophia a glance, uncertain if Maggie was implying something more than just friendship. Sophia, equally flustered, turned her attention back to her plate, cheeks warm. As the meal concluded, everyone helped tidy up. Ben carried dishes to the sink, occasionally cracking a joke that made Sophia laugh. Maggie packed some leftover bread for them to take home. The sense of camaraderie reminded Sophia of what a real community felt like. Supportive, genuine, without ulterior motives. Stepping outside into the late afternoon sunshine, the group lingered a moment by Maggie's garden. You two come back anytime, Maggie said. My door's open. Sophia embraced the older woman impulsively, a gesture of gratitude that brought tears to Maggie's eyes. Thank you for everything. You've all been so kind. On the drive back to the farm, an easy silence filled the truck's cab. Jake finally spoke, glancing at Sophia. I'm glad you're making friends. It feels right, doesn't it? She stared at the winding road ahead, her heart full. It does, more right than I expected. Yet beneath that warmth, a quiet tension remained. They both knew that acceptance in the community wouldn't shield them if the outside world came crashing in. The fragile cocoon they'd built with Maggie and Ben's help might be shattered by a single phone call or an unexpected visitor. Still, for this brief moment, the budding friendship among the four of them was a haven of hope. A place where secrets and fears could, at least temporarily, be held at bay. Jake was in the barn mending a bridle strap when the sound of an approaching vehicle interrupted the calm. It wasn't Ben's truck, which he recognized by the distinct muffler rattle, nor Maggie's pickup. This engine purred more smoothly. He dropped his tools and stepped out, spotting a sleek black SUV rolling up the long dirt driveway. His heart thudded. No one around here drove a car like that unless they were from out of town or working for someone important. Sophia, he whispered urgently, glancing around. She was just a few yards away, carrying a bucket of feed. Her eyes went wide as she, too, registered the newcomer. Go, he urged, into the barn. Stay out of sight. She nodded, ducking behind a stack of hay bales. Jake took a steadying breath and walked to meet the vehicle, forcing a casual demeanor. The SUV's door opened, revealing a tall man in a charcoal grey suit. He had sharp features, slicked back hair, and an air of quiet authority. Afternoon, Jake greeted, feigning politeness. The man inclined his head. Jake Miller, I presume. Jake felt a chill. That's right, something I can help you with. The stranger reached into his jacket pocket, not for a weapon, but a business card. He held it out. My name is Michael Harper. I'm a private investigator hired by the Blackwood family to locate Sophia Blackwood. I believe she might have come through this area. Jake kept his face neutral, ignoring the business card. Lots of people pass through. Not sure I can help. Michael gave a thin smile, scanning the property behind Jake. The sheriff mentioned you found a woman after the storm. He wasn't certain of her identity, but you do realize there's a considerable reward for reliable information. Jake's pulse roared in his ears. I did find someone, yes, but she didn't match the description of that missing woman. She was just a lost traveler, needed a place to rest. Michael eyed him knowingly. And where is this traveler now? Jake spread his hands. She left a few days ago. The investigator's gaze hardened. That's so. And you wouldn't mind if I take a look around? Make sure she isn't still here, perhaps in need of assistance. Jake forced a calm expression, though dread coiled in his gut. "You got a warrant?" A muscle in Michael's jaw twitched. "No, but Mr. Blackwood is worried sick. He's authorized me to pay handsomely for any tips leading to his daughter's safe return. This farm looks like it could use a bit of financial help." Jake's gaze flicked to the barn, heart pounding. "I'm not interested in any reward, and unless you got legal papers, I'm afraid I can't let you snoop around." Michael's lips curved in a mirthless grin. "It would be a shame if someone thought you were interfering with a rescue effort. You might face legal consequences for harboring a missing person." Jake fought to keep his composure. "I'm not harboring anyone. If you want to check abandoned cars or run a search, talk to the sheriff." Their stare-down was intense, Michael's unwavering, Jake's defiant. Finally, the investigator sighed. "All right, I'll do it by the book." He turned to leave, but paused. "If you happen to see Sophia, tell her it would be in her best interest to come home. Her father just wants to ensure her safety." Jake held silent until Michael climbed back into the SUV and drove off, dust kicking up from the gravel. The moment the vehicle vanished down the road, Sophia emerged from the barn, eyes shining with fear. "Did you hear that?" she asked, voice trembling. "He's going to keep searching." Jake nodded, raking a hand through his hair. "Yeah, and we can't stop him." "But we can make it harder for him to find you." Sophia's shoulders sagged as she glanced around the farm that had begun to feel like a sanctuary. "I can't let him drag me back. Jake, She stopped, emotions catching in her throat. He moved closer, placing a steady hand on her arm. "We'll figure something out." His gaze was grim. "But we may need a backup plan. Because if he comes back with the law on his side, it won't matter what we say." She swallowed hard, tears hovering at the corners of her eyes. "I'm putting you at risk. Maybe I should go. Maybe I should just run again." Jake gently shook his head. "Where would you even go? And do you really want to keep running forever?" Sophia hesitated, the question hanging heavy. "No," she whispered. "But I don't want you caught in the crossfire." His grip on her arm tightened in reassurance. "Hey, we're in this together now. If your father's man tries to strong-arm us, we'll have Maggie, Ben, and maybe even the sheriff on our side, at least until they figure out whose story to believe." The weight of his words settled between them. The confrontation wasn't just about a missing heiress or a farm in financial trouble. It was about whether their fragile trust could withstand the external forces closing in. Sophia took a shaky breath, wiping away a stray tear. "Thank you," she murmured, even though she knew no amount of gratitude could fully express what she felt. She was terrified, but also strangely resolute. Here, with Jake, she had found something more meaningful than just refuge. She had found a reason to stand her ground. Jake glanced out at the empty road where the SUV had disappeared. The first confrontation might be over, but he sensed it was only the beginning of a storm to rival the one that had blown Sophia onto his land. One thing was clear: they couldn't hide in the shadows forever. The world outside was knocking, and sooner or later they'd have to answer. On a crisp, clear morning just a few days after Michael Harper's unsettling visit, Jake found Sophia already awake in the kitchen. She stood at the counter, sleeves rolled up, busily measuring sugar into a large pot. "You're up early," he remarked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. She turned with a quick smile. "I couldn't sleep. Figured I'd get started on these jams," Maggie suggested. "We want a decent batch ready, right?" Jake stepped closer, peering into the pot at the heap of fresh berries. A swirl of sweet, tart fragrance filled the air. "Looks promising," he said. "I'll grab the jars we sterilized last night." Despite the tension hanging over them, Michael Harper's threat still fresh in their minds, they found a certain solace in the simple tasks of farm life. The jam project had become a joint effort, and every step offered them a small sense of accomplishment. If nothing else, it gave them hope that they weren't powerless. Soon, the kitchen buzzed with activity. Steam rose as Sophia stirred the bubbling berries. Jake wiped down jars, carefully setting them to dry. Sunlight streamed through the window, highlighting dust motes that danced in the air. Outside, the lamb bleated, hungry for its morning bottle. "This might actually work," Sophia mused, glancing around. "We can sell these jars at the local stand," Maggie mentioned, "then maybe at the county fair in a couple of weeks. It could help with the farm's bills." Jake nodded. "Mom's recipe used to be popular. Folks will probably line up for the Miller jam again." A gentle nostalgia touched his voice. She'd be happy to see it revived. Before they could bask in the moment, the crackle of the radio on the windowsill caught their attention. A local station recapped news. More talk of a missing Seattle heiress, rumors of an increased reward, and the possibility that she was still in the area. Sophia paused her stirring, tension evident in her shoulders. Jake moved to lower the volume, noticing her troubled expression. "They'll keep announcing it," he said quietly. "But you're safe here, so long as no one decides to trade that information for a quick buck." Sophia turned the heat down on the stove, her eyes distant. "I trust Maggie and Ben, but I worry about other folks, people we don't know." Jake placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "It's a risk, but we can't just stop living. Let's focus on these small steps. You want me to handle the rest of the stirring?" She nodded, wordlessly handing him the spoon. Distraction was the best antidote to fear, so she set about labeling the jars, writing Miller's Homemade in neat lettering. Each time she finished, she felt a tiny victory, a reminder that life could still progress despite looming threats. By mid-morning, they'd filled a dozen jars, leaving them on the windowsill to cool. Ben dropped by, clapping his hands in approval. "Smells great in here. I can already taste that jam on some hot biscuits. We'll get you a sample, don't worry," Jake joked, while Sophia wiped a streak of berry juice from her cheek. Ben took a seat at the small kitchen table. "Got some news. I heard Michael Harper, your new friend, talking to Sheriff Patterson, trying to convince him to organize a more thorough search around these parts." Jake exchanged a glance with Sophia, who went pale. "How serious is it?" Jake asked. Ben shrugged, face grim. "Hard to say. Patterson's cautious. He won't let a private detective run the show, but the bounty's big enough to attract attention from folks in neighboring counties." Sophia set down the label she was writing, heart pounding. "People are going to be on the lookout, aren't they?" Ben nodded slowly. "I'd guess so, which means we all need to keep our eyes open. Maggie's prepared to stall if anyone comes snooping around her place, but be mindful of strangers. Don't let your guard down." Jake squeezed Sophia's hand under the table. "We'll be careful." As Ben left, the reality of their situation weighed heavily, yet they had jam cooling on the sill, and chores to attend to, animals to feed, fences to repair. Life on a farm marched on regardless of looming threats. They spent the afternoon tending the vegetable garden, now partly salvaged from the storm damage. Row by row, they replanted seeds, checking for any leftover debris. Several times, Sophia stopped, scanning the horizon with anxious eyes. Jake, noticing, would place a reassuring hand on her back. The silent exchange was enough. No words needed to voice the fear that each car engine echo might be Harper returning. Despite the anxiety, they managed a small triumph by evening. Row after row of newly sown seeds, plus the jars of jam neatly labeled and ready for sale. Dinner was a humble affair. Scrambled eggs, homemade bread, and a taste of their fresh jam. It glistened in the lamplight, the sweet reward of a day's labor. "It's really good," Sophia said, savoring a spoonful. A genuine smile crept onto her face. "Maybe we'll sell out faster than we think," Jake chuckled, wiping his mouth with a napkin. Here's hoping. Every sale helps. Every small victory counts. As the day drew to a close, they retreated to their separate rooms. Jake felt the undercurrent of tension still present, but he also sensed a growing inner strength in both of them, a conviction that they wouldn't be cowed by fear. They had chosen to work, to create, to embrace hope. In the face of swirling uncertainty, that choice was a victory all on its own. 2 days later, an unexpected caller arrived at Jake's farmhouse, Sheriff Tom Patterson. This time, he didn't look casual. His brow was knitted in concern, and he stood with rigid posture at the porch steps. Jake met him outside, shutting the door behind him so Sophia wouldn't be seen. "Morning, Sheriff." Tom removed his hat, exhaling sharply. "Jake, mind if I come in? Need to talk to you about some developments." Jake's throat went dry. "Actually, it's a bit messy inside. Maybe we can talk out here." He gestured to the porch chairs, hoping to keep Tom away from any sign of Sophia's presence. Tom shrugged. "All right." Once seated, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "This private investigator, Harper, he's pushing me to search your property. Says he has reason to believe you've been hiding Sophia Blackwood." Jake clenched his jaw. "And do you have any actual evidence of that, Sheriff?" Tom studied him, eyes narrowing. "No, not beyond Harper's suspicions and some rumors that you'd taken in a stranger. I haven't gotten a formal warrant request, but it may come to that." Jake shifted, trying to appear calm. "I told you before, I found a woman. She left soon after. I don't know where she went." Tom rubbed his temples, looking genuinely torn. "Jake, we go way back. You're not the kind to lie. But there's a lot of money in play here, and Harper's stirring up trouble. If something's going on, I need to know now so I can protect you." "Protect you." The words struck Jake with a pang. Tom was offering him a chance to come clean before the situation escalated, but confessing would mean betraying Sophia. "I understand, Sheriff," he said quietly, "but I've got nothing more to say." A shadow of disappointment crossed Tom's features. He stood, placing his hat back on. "All right, but be warned. If it comes to a search warrant, I won't be able to turn a blind eye. If she's here, you both could face serious charges." Jake nodded, the weight of Tom's words settling. "Got it." Tom paused, as if hoping Jake would change his tune. When he didn't, the sheriff shook his head. "Take care, Jake." Once Tom was gone, Jake stepped inside to find Sophia anxiously peering from behind a curtain. "I heard some of it," she murmured, face pale. "I'm causing you too much risk. Maybe—" Jake held up a hand, cutting her off. "Don't say it. I know what you're thinking. If you try to run now, you'll be out there alone. It's not safe." Her eyes brimmed with tears of frustration. "But if they search this place, you'll be in trouble." He set his jaw. "I'll deal with it." His tone was firm, yet beneath the bravado, uncertainty gnawed at him. The moral dilemma weighed heavily. Jake knew the right thing might be to tell the truth, inform the sheriff, and let the authorities handle the feud between Sophia and her father. But every time he thought about it, he remembered the dread on her face. The arranged marriage forcing her hand, betraying her confidence felt impossible. Later, as dusk settled, Maggie dropped by with a basket of vegetables. She immediately sensed the tension when Jake opened the door. "What's wrong?" she asked. Jake explained the sheriff's visit in hushed tones. Maggie pursed her lips. "They're turning up the heat. Harper's not going away quietly." Sophia joined them in the living room, her posture rigid with tension. "I'm sorry," she said, for what felt like the 100th time. "I never wanted to put anyone in jeopardy." Maggie offered a sympathetic smile. "Don't be sorry. You did what you had to do." "That doesn't mean the fallout's easy, though." They talked in circles, options for hiding Sophia, potential excuses if a search was conducted. Each idea seemed more desperate than the last. Ultimately, all recognized that if the law came with a warrant, there was little they could do to stop it. At length, Maggie squeezed Sophia's hand. "Sometimes we face a crossroad where neither choice is easy. You'll have to decide what's worth fighting for. Is it your freedom from your father's control, or Jake's safety, or both?" Sophia's eyes glistened. "Can I protect him while refusing to go back to Seattle? Is that even possible?" Jake, who'd been silent, finally spoke. "We'll figure something out. I won't let them bully us into a corner." But doubt laced his words. The moral and legal implications were growing heavier each day. If discovered, he could be charged with harboring a missing person. And what about Maggie and Ben, who were complicit in this charade? Despite the swirling fears, they agreed on one point. They wouldn't let Harper's intimidation tactics decide their fate. The farm was their sanctuary, and they'd fight to keep it that way, at least until they could craft a better plan. When Maggie left, darkness had fully enveloped the house. Sophia retreated to her small room, lying awake for hours. She mulled over the question that haunted her. Could she maintain her moral stance, refusing to be coerced into marriage, without dragging the people she cared about into ruin? Jakes, meanwhile, stood at the window, staring out at the moonlit fields. He pictured a day when the jam business thrived, the debts were paid, and he no longer had to lie to the sheriff. He wanted that sense of peace more than anything. But each choice he faced felt like a betrayal of Sophia, of himself, or of the law he'd always respected. And so, they remained caught between loyalty and legality, compassion and caution, love and the law. Only time would tell which force would prevail. A week passed. Harvest season neared, and the county fair loomed just a few days away. Jake and Sophia poured their energy into preparing jars of jam, determined to display them at a small stand. They hoped the fair would bring in enough income to offset some of the farm's debts, but an undercurrent of anxiety shadowed every decision. One afternoon, they stood in the barn, taking stock of supplies. The lamb, now stronger, frolicked around their feet. Sophia smiled, grateful for at least one bright spot in this tense period. "She's doing so well," she said, picking up the lamb to scratch behind its ears. Jake nodded. "You did good taking care of her. She's a little survivor." Just then, the sound of vehicles approaching cut through the barn's stillness, multiple engines, from the direction of the main road. Jake's heart lurched. "Stay here," he whispered, rushing outside. He found 3 cars pulling into the yard. One was the sheriff's cruiser, another an unmarked black sedan, and the third an unfamiliar SUV. Michael Harper stepped out of the sedan, flanked by 2 men who might have been private security. Sheriff Tom Patterson got out of his cruiser, looking uneasy. A county official Jake recognized vaguely from town hall followed suit. Jake's insides twisted. This wasn't just a casual call. It was an organized search. The county official held a folder under his arm, likely the warrant. "Jake Miller," the official said, voice echoing in the hush. "We have reason to believe you're harboring Sophia Blackwood, a missing person. We have a warrant to search your property." Jake forced himself to stand tall. "On what grounds?" he managed to ask, though his voice shook slightly. Michael Harper stepped forward, face impassive. "On grounds that multiple witnesses claim to have seen you with a woman matching Sophia's description. Plus, the sheriff's repeated visits haven't satisfied our concerns." Tom Patterson lifted his gaze to meet Jake's, regret flickering there. "It's official business now, Jake." "I'm sorry." Jake rubbed a hand over his mouth. I understand." He could only hope Sophia stayed hidden long enough for him to figure out a plan. The men fanned out, Harper and his security heading toward the barn, the county official checking around the house. The sheriff stayed with Jake. "You can cooperate," Tom said quietly, "or resist and make things harder. Which will it be?" Exhaling, Jake forced calm. "I'll cooperate," he said, figuring any resistance would only worsen the situation. Maybe, just maybe, they'd fail to find Sophia. Harper's footsteps crunched on gravel as he approached the barn door. Jake's mind raced. Sophia was inside with the lamb. Would she hide among the hay bales? Could she slip out the back? Was there enough time? Jake followed at a distance. Harper's security man stepped in first, scanning the dim interior. The sharp smell of straw and animals filled the air. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. Then the lamb gave a startled bleat, bounding away from the intruder's boots. Sophia was nowhere in sight. Jake's pulse quickened. Maybe she'd found a spot to hide. Harper prowled forward, peering around every corner, yanking open stall doors, rummaging through equipment storage. She's got to be here somewhere, he muttered under his breath. Jake stood stiffly, hands clenched at his sides. All you're gonna find is livestock. At that moment, the barn's side door slammed shut. One of the security men rushed over, flinging it open to reveal no one. A swirl of dust motes danced in the sunbeam. Jake guessed Sophia must have slipped through that exit and run for cover. Harper looked frustrated, mouth set in a thin line. "Check around the house," he barked at the other man. "Outbuildings too." Jake's heart pounded with fear for Sophia. She might hide in the woods, but if Harper had men patrolling the perimeter, her chances of escape were slim. This was the worst-case scenario, the obstacle he dreaded, a full-scale search, backed by legal authority and private security muscle. Minutes felt like hours as they tore through the barn. Jake remained powerless, forced to watch them rifle through his property. All he could do was pray that Sophia had found a better hiding spot than the hay bales. Outside, a sudden shout drew their attention. "Nothing out here!" someone called, frustration evident. The men regrouped in the barn's entrance. Harper glared at Jake, fists tight. "We're not done. We'll scour every inch if we have to." Tom Patterson, his expression grim, stepped in. "We'll do a thorough check, Harper. But if we don't find anything, you'll have to accept that Sophia Blackwood isn't here." Jake suppressed a trembling sigh. For now, they hadn't caught her. But the search was far from over, and each passing moment felt like a countdown. The question hung in the air. Could she possibly evade them much longer? After what seemed an eternity, the search party completed their grim sweep of the house and outbuildings. They yanked open closets, peered under beds, rummaged through cabinets, leaving disarray in their wake. Michael Harper pushed each door open with growing frustration, but he found no sign of Sophia. Jake kept silent throughout, stoic on the outside but inwardly quaking. He had no idea how Sophia managed to evade them. Maybe she'd fled to the tree line, the creek, anywhere out of sight. He just hoped she was safe. Finally, the county official pulled Harper aside. "We've checked the house, the barn, the shed, and the property line. There's no one here but Mr. Miller." Harper's face was thunderous. "She has to be here. I know she is." Tom Patterson stepped forward, voice calm. "We've executed the warrant, and there's no evidence. Unless you have a tip that leads us somewhere else, that's it." Harper glowered at the sheriff, then at Jake. "You might be hiding her somewhere beyond your property, but don't think this ends here, Miller. I'll be watching." Without another word, Harper and his men stomped off, climbing into their vehicles. The official gave Jake an apologetic shrug before following suit. Only Tom lingered, standing by his cruiser. He looked troubled, his weathered features tight with worry. "I meant it," he said quietly. "If there's nothing to find, that's the end of my involvement. But be aware, Harper's not letting this go." Jake nodded, unsure how to respond. "Thanks, Sheriff." He watched Tom drive away, leaving the yard a mess of tire tracks and scattered footprints. The hush that followed felt ominous. Quickly, Jake hurried around the side of the barn, scanning the fields. "Sophia," he called in a low voice, heart pounding. No answer. His boots squelched in the muddy ground as he reached the edge of the woods. Still no sign of her. He pushed through the underbrush, calling her name, panic growing with each step. Finally, a soft rustle drew his attention. He spotted a flash of dark hair among the thick tree trunks. "Sophia!" She emerged from behind a cluster of pines, breathing hard, twigs in her hair. "Jake, oh God, are they gone?" Relief washed over him at the sight of her. He rushed forward, pulling her into a tight embrace. She clung to him, trembling. "Yes," he whispered. "They're gone, for now." They remained locked in that embrace, tension dissolving into shared relief. When they finally broke apart, tears shimmered in her eyes. "I ran through the back door as soon as I heard them, hid behind some fallen logs. I was so afraid they'd track me." Jake exhaled unsteadily. "They turned the whole place upside down, but they didn't find you." A shaky laugh escaped Sophia, part relief, part disbelief. "What now?" "They'll just come back again, won't they?" Jake's mouth set in a grim line. "Probably Harper won't quit unless he's forced to." They trudged back to the house, stepping around broken possessions Harper's team had tossed aside. Sophia grimaced at the chaos. "I'm so sorry, Jake. This place is wrecked." He shook his head, forcing a small smile. "Nothing we can't fix. I'm just glad you're safe." While they cleaned up, Ben and Maggie arrived, having seen the cars leaving. Ben helped Jake reposition furniture, righting overturned chairs. Maggie comforted Sophia, offering her a cup of tea. The living room felt like a war zone, but the presence of friends helped restore a semblance of normalcy. Once everything was somewhat back in order, they gathered at the kitchen table. The sense of partial victory hung in the air. They'd narrowly avoided Harper, but the cost had been high. The next time might not be so fortunate. Maggie cleared her throat. "They're bound to keep hounding you, Jake. You too, Sophia. Even if they didn't find you now, they'll be more vigilant." Sophia looked at Jake, tears threatening again. "I can't stand seeing you live in fear, always on edge. Maybe I should turn myself in. Fight this battle legally." Ben leaned forward, brow creased. "You think your father will let you just walk free once you're back in his orbit? If Harper's any indication, they want control, not conversation." Sophia's voice trembled with pent-up frustration. "But if I stay, I'm endangering Jake's livelihood, possibly Maggie's and yours too, Ben. This is all because of me." Jake fixed her with a resolute stare. "We make our own choices. I chose to help you. Maggie and Ben chose to keep your secret. That's on us, not on you." He paused, voice softening. "Look, maybe this close call was our wake-up call. We need a plan, something that ends all this chasing and hiding." Maggie patted Sophia's hand. "You have the right to live freely, dear, but you might need a good lawyer or a mediator to break free from your father's power. Nobody said it'd be easy, but you don't have to face it alone." The conversation stretched on, brainstorming legal options, contacting trustworthy people outside the region, anything to force a negotiation that wouldn't result in Sophia's forced return. By the end, they had no perfect solution, only possibilities. Yet there was a renewed determination to stand firm together. Later that evening, after their friends departed, Jake and Sophia sat quietly on the porch, the sky streaked with the reds and oranges of dusk. "We got lucky today," Jake murmured. Sophia nodded, threading her fingers through his. "We did, but luck runs out eventually." He squeezed her hand gently. "Then we'll rely on something stronger than luck. Our wits, our friends, and our resolve. Because I'm not giving up on you or this farm without one hell of a fight." The partial victory felt bittersweet, underscoring just how precarious their situation remained. But in that shared resolve, a hint of optimism glimmered, like the last rays of sun peeking over the horizon before nightfall. The county fair arrived sooner than expected, casting the small town into a bustle of activity. Booths sprang up in the fairground fields, offering everything from homemade pies to livestock competitions. Families poured in from neighboring counties, eager for funnel cakes and carnival rides. Underneath the celebratory surface, however, Jake and Sophia knew tension still simmered. They decided to bring their jam to the fair, as planned. It was a risky move. Public exposure could mean recognition for Sophia. But they needed the extra income, and perhaps showing a brave face would throw Harper off guard. Morning dawned bright and warm. Jake loaded jars into the back of Ben's pickup, carefully padding them with blankets. Sophia wore a simple sundress and a straw hat pulled low, hoping not to draw too much attention. Maggie joined them, helping arrange a small display table adorned with hand-lettered signs, Miller's Homemade Preserves. As soon as they set up, curious passers-by wandered over, lured by the promise of samples. "Miller jam. It's been a while since we saw that around," an older woman remarked, eyeing Sophia with mild curiosity. Jake smiled, keeping the conversation light. "We're bringing back an old family recipe. Care to try a spoonful?" The woman tasted the jam and lit up. "That's the real deal right there." She promptly bought 2 jars. Sophia exhaled, relieved at the positive reaction. One by one, people approached, sampling the jam and leaving with a jar or 2. The small successes fueled her confidence. She found herself chatting pleasantly with locals, describing how they revived Mrs. Miller's recipe. Yet she couldn't shake the prickling at the back of her neck, a sense that eyes were on her. Each time a newcomer strolled by, she fought the urge to shrink back. Jake, sensing her unease, stood close, a reassuring presence. Around midday, the fair was in full swing. Laughter and music filled the air, and the smell of grilled burgers mingled with cotton candy sweetness. Ben appeared at their booth, grinning as he waved a half-eaten corn dog. Heck of a turnout. "You two are selling like hotcakes?" Maggie, helping ring up a customer, nodded enthusiastically. "We might need more stock soon. Think we can fetch more jars from the truck?" Jake glanced at Sophia. "Sure, let's walk over together." They headed toward the truck, weaving through the lively crowd. Kids darted around with balloons, and carnival lights twinkled even in daylight. Sophia felt a bittersweet pang. She had rarely attended such simple community events growing up. It felt so normal, so beautifully ordinary. Reaching the pickup, Jake rummaged under a tarp for the extra boxes of jam. Sophia stood guard, scanning the throng. And then she spotted him, Michael Harper, pacing near the livestock pens, scanning the crowd with hawk-like precision. Her stomach clenched in terror. "Jake," she hissed, tugging his sleeve. "He's here. Michael's here." He cursed under his breath, dropping the jam box back into the truck. Should we leave?" Sophia pressed her lips together, mind racing. "He'd see us if we tried to drive out now. The roads are jam-packed." Jake steadied her with a hand on her arm. "All right, let's think. Maybe we can blend into the crowd, slip away until he's gone." Just then, a commotion broke out near the fair's entrance, someone screaming about a lost child. A cluster of people hurried in that direction. Harper's head snapped toward the noise, as though torn between checking it out or continuing his search. "Now's our chance," Jake whispered. He grabbed Sophia's hand, leading her behind the rows of booths and out of Harper's direct line of sight. They ducked into a side area where a row of portable restrooms stood. The smell wasn't pleasant, but no one loitered there. Heart pounding, Sophia clutched Jake's hand. "I'm so tired of running," she whispered, voice laced with desperation. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I know, but we have no choice. If Harper sees you, he'll call his men. Then it's all over." She closed her eyes, breathing unsteadily. "I want a normal life," she murmured. "I want to sell jam, feed the animals, just exist without constantly looking over my shoulder." Jake's gaze softened with empathy. "We'll figure it out, I promise. Before they could plan their next move, footsteps approached. Jake stiffened, pulling Sophia behind a nearby booth. They peered around the corner, hearts thudding. It was Harper again, talking on his phone. Over the hum of the fair, they caught fragments of his conversation. Yes, fairgrounds. She has to be here. More men. Keep watch. Sophia clenched her jaw. This was escalating, just as they feared. If Harper had additional men searching, it was only a matter of time before they spotted her, or one of their neighbors who recognized her might unintentionally tip him off. Jake squeezed her hand. We can't stay hidden forever. Maggie's back at the booth alone. If Harper checks there... Sophia felt a fresh wave of guilt. Maggie will cover for us, but it's not fair to make her lie again. They stood in tense silence, pinned down by Harper's relentless search. At last, he moved off, still on his phone, oblivious to their hiding spot. Jake exhaled. We've got to slip out. Let's circle around, grab Maggie and Ben and leave. We'll cut our losses on jam sales. Sophia nodded, chest tight. This was more than an inconvenience. It signaled a decisive shift. Harper was done playing nice, ramping up his search in public places. Their attempts to hold onto normal life were being crushed under the weight of unstoppable pursuit. With Harper vanishing into the crowd, they seized the moment. Heart in her throat, Sophia followed Jake, navigating behind booths and display tents, determined to reach Maggie and Ben. Each step felt like stepping deeper into a crisis that refused to relent. Somewhere in the swirl of carnival sounds and excited chatter, they found a slim ray of hope, if only in their shared determination. But they both knew one truth. The final confrontation with Harper and the Blackwood family loomed, and there would be no easy escape this time. Jake and Sophia managed to slip away from the county fair without Harper catching sight of them again. It was a tense drive back to the farm, crammed into Ben's pickup with Maggie. All four remained silent, haunted by the fact that Harper had been right on their heels. Once home, Jake and Sophia retreated to the porch, physically exhausted and emotionally raw. The sun dipped low over the fields, casting long shadows across the yard. Maggie and Ben lingered near the truck, speaking in hushed tones. Before Maggie finally approached the steps, she set a gentle hand on Sophia's shoulder. I'm heading back to my place. If anything happens, call me, day or night. Sophia nodded, too drained to speak, and Maggie drove off with Ben. Only the hum of crickets broke the silence. Jake exhaled, running a hand over his face. We can't keep living like this, always running, always hiding. Sophia swallowed hard. I know, but what choice do we have? Before Jake could answer, the distant sound of tires on gravel pricked their ears. Another visitor this late. They both rose, hearts pounding. A sleek black luxury car emerged from the darkness. Headlights swept across the yard as it came to a stop. Jake felt Sophia's hand grip his arm, trembling. This time it wasn't Harper's SUV. It looked even more expensive. When the door opened, a tall, grey-haired man stepped out, flanked by a second figure, a stocky, suited individual who exuded quiet menace. Jake's gut tightened. He knew instinctively who this must be. Sophia, the older man called, voice resonant with authority. Sophia, come here. She went rigid. Father, she whispered, eyes wide with shock. Richard Blackwood stood there, dressed in a tailored suit despite the dusty farm setting. His piercing gaze flicked to Jake, assessing him with cool disdain. Sophia, I've come to take you home. Jake squared his shoulders, stepping protectively in front of her. She's not going anywhere against her will. Richard's sharp eyes pinned Jake. You must be the farmer who's been hiding my daughter. I've heard quite a bit about you. Believe me, young man, you have no idea who you're dealing with. Sophia stepped forward, chin lifted despite her trembling hands. Father, you shouldn't have come here. I'm not a child. and I'm not returning to Seattle under your terms." Her father's expression hardened. "You've disgraced this family, running off like a fugitive. You've brought shame on the Blackwood name." Andrew, he jerked his head at the stocky man, who stepped forward, "is still prepared to move forward with the arrangement. Let's leave this place before more damage is done." Sophia's heart hammered. Andrew Green, her supposed fiancé, wore a neutral expression, but she caught a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "Sophia," he said in a low, controlled voice, "we all want this resolved. Your father's business depends on our partnership. This marriage can't be delayed forever." Jake clenched his fists at his sides, anger coiling in his chest. This is her life, not a corporate transaction. Richard shot Jake a look of pure contempt. "Stay out of this, Miller. You've meddled enough. I could have you arrested on the spot for harboring my daughter, but I'm trying to handle it amicably." Sophia mustered her courage. "Amicably? Forcing me to marry Andrew against my will is your idea of amicable." "I won't do it." The tension spiked, crackling through the evening air. Andrew took a step toward her, but Jake blocked his path. "Back off," Jake warned. Richard's lips thinned. "Sophia, you're coming with me. Right now, I'll handle your indiscretion quietly, but only if you comply." Sophia's breath rattled in her chest. She glanced at Jake, recalling every kindness he'd shown, the sense of freedom she'd finally tasted. Then she turned back to her father, resolve burning behind her eyes. "No, I'm not leaving with you, not on your terms." Richard's jaw tightened. "That's unfortunate. Andrew, call the authorities. We'll settle this quickly." Panic blazed in Sophia's chest. If the authorities came, they could cart Jake away for aiding her, and she'd have no choice but to return to Seattle. She saw Andrew fish out his phone, about to dial. Her heart pounded in her ears. Suddenly, a new voice interrupted. "Hold on!" Maggie stood at the property's edge, having returned the moment she saw the unfamiliar car. Beside her was Ben, who looked ready for a fight. "Can't let you just barge in here and threaten folks, Mr. Blackwood," Maggie said, her tone calm but firm. Richard's glare flicked to the newcomers, irritation clear. "This is a private family matter. Keep out of it." Maggie folded her arms. "Looks a lot more like bullying to me. This is our community. We don't stand by while someone tries to force one of our own into something." "Our own," Sophia repeated inwardly, feeling a surge of gratitude. Maggie and Ben, with unwavering resolve, had cast their lot with her and Jake. Andrew hesitated, phone in hand, uncertain. Richard's nostrils flared. "You people are meddling in affairs that don't concern you. Sophia belongs in Seattle. If she won't come willingly, I'll see to it that your precious farm is left in ruins from legal fees, lawsuits, whatever it takes." Jake felt Sophia's hand slip into his. Her grip was tight, but he sensed her determination. This was the moment they dreaded, the confrontation with a man who wielded immense power and little mercy. Despite the terror coiling in his stomach, Jake drew a steadying breath and spoke, voice unwavering. "I won't let you hurt her or destroy this place. If it's a fight you want, you'll get one, but you'll have to get through all of us." In the fading light, the farm's dusty yard became a stage for a showdown that had been building since that night Sophia stumbled into Jake's life. Consequences hovered on every side, lawsuits, arrests, betrayals, yet neither Jake nor Sophia would back down. Richard Blackwood fixed them both with a withering stare. "Then you've just made the biggest mistake of your life." And with that, the confrontation stood at a fever pitch, none of them certain which path the escalating conflict would take, but all knowing they'd crossed the point of no return. When Richard Blackwood finally left that night, his threats ringing in the air, he made it clear he was giving them no more than a few days to rethink. Otherwise, he'd unleash the full weight of legal action. Andrew, reluctant to cause a scene in front of so many witnesses, followed suit, though his inscrutable gaze lingered on Sophia before driving off. The farm felt eerily quiet in their wake. Maggie and Ben stayed a while longer, ensuring Sophia was safe and comforting Jake with firm handshakes and nods of solidarity. But even they departed eventually, leaving the two alone with the aftermath of the explosive confrontation. Inside the farmhouse, Sophia slumped into the old couch, the tension draining from her body in violent shivers. "He's never been this furious before," she whispered, voice trembling. "It scares me, Jake. He's capable of doing anything to protect his reputation, and that includes tearing down your life." Jake set aside his battered hat on the coffee table, sinking next to her. "I've never been one to run from a fight," he said quietly, "but this isn't a fair one. Richard has money, connections, lawyers, everything I don't." She turned toward him, eyes glossy with tears. "I can't let you lose this farm because of me. It's all you have. I won't stand by and watch it be destroyed." A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the ticking clock on the mantel. Finally, Jake inhaled slowly. "Sophia, I'd lose more than the farm if I let your father drag you away from here against your will. It'd destroy me in a different way." Her face crumpled at his words, and a sob escaped her throat. She reached for his hand, interlacing their fingers. "I never imagined I'd find someone who'd stand by me like this. I don't deserve it." Jake gently lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You deserve to choose your own life. Everyone does." His quiet conviction flooded her with gratitude and guilt all at once. Gratitude for his unwavering support, guilt that her troubles threatened to ruin him. She pressed her forehead against his, eyes closing. In that moment, closeness was all they had to ward off despair. Eventually, the weight of exhaustion overwhelmed them. They agreed to rest, though sleeping was nearly impossible with so much at stake. The next morning arrived with leaden skies, the threat of rain clinging to the humid air. Jake and Sophia went through the motions of farm chores in a fog of anxiety. The jam jars, the garden, the lamb, they all needed tending. But a gnawing sense of impending doom loomed. Word spread quickly through town. Mr. Blackwood himself had shown up. Rumors swirled of an imminent legal battle, a wealthy tycoon threatening to bankrupt the local farmer. Some townsfolk seemed sympathetic, others were wary, worried that any association with Jake might bring trouble. Sophia noticed the change when she ventured into the small grocery store for supplies. The cashier, normally chatty, seemed guarded. Another customer whispered behind her hand as Sophia passed. The tension of the previous night clung like a stubborn stain. By midday, she returned home, finding Jake in the barn, absently checking on the horses without his usual thoroughness. She touched his arm gently. "How are you holding up?" He let out a humorless chuckle. "Trying to figure out how to pay the mortgage if Richard Blackwood makes good on his threats. Hard to focus on anything else." Her throat tightened. This was the cost of her freedom, Jake burdened by financial terror. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He turned to her, eyes filled with a grim determination. "No need for sorry, but we have to make a plan. Hiding won't work, not with him breathing down our necks. Maybe Maggie's right. Maybe we should get a lawyer, see if there's a legal way to free you from your father's hold. If you're not legally missing, he can't accuse me of harboring you." Sophia nodded, swallowing hard. "We could try that, but lawyers cost money," and Jake cut her off. "We'll find a way. I might have to sell a piece of the land or the livestock, but I'll do it if it means giving you a fighting chance." Her eyes welled with tears again. She hated how every solution seemed to demand more sacrifice from him, yet she felt no better alternative. If she went back to Seattle without a legal approach, she'd be forced into that marriage, or at best, cut off from her father's resources, but still under constant watch. As the barn door creaked in the stiff breeze, a single raindrop fell, then another, until the roof echoed with the steady patter of a coming shower. They stood together in the half-light, each wrestling with the pain of uncertain futures, the aftermath of a confrontation that had only highlighted how vulnerable they truly were. Still, within that shared pain, there lay the faintest glimmer of clarity. Their bond, already forged through crisis, had grown stronger. They might be facing a powerful enemy, but they weren't facing him alone. And in that unity, they found the first rays of hope amid the storm. Over the next few days, Sophia and Jake began taking concrete steps to transform their precarious situation into a battle plan. Maggie introduced them to Sam Willis, a semi-retired attorney who lived in a neighboring town, known for his fair-minded approach. Sam was a wiry man in his 60s, with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor. Seated at Jake's kitchen table, he listened carefully as Sophia recounted her background. Her father's business empire, the arranged marriage, her escape during the storm. Sam asked pointed questions, taking notes in a worn leather notebook. "You're not a minor," he said thoughtfully, "so your father can't force you into marriage, at least not legally. But his financial influence could complicate matters. If he claims you're mentally unfit or tries some other angle, it might take a formal court proceeding to prove otherwise." Sophia fiddled with her hands, anxiety churning in her stomach. He'd do anything to protect his reputation and business. If I'm labeled incompetent or manipulated, I might lose all rights to my inheritance. I don't care about the money, but I care about my freedom. Sam nodded, his tone gentle. "Understood. We can challenge any false claims, but it'll be a fight. As for you, Mr. Miller," he turned to Jake, "there's a risk of charges for harboring a missing person, though that's shaky legally. If Sophia affirms she stayed here willingly, your father can't prove wrongdoing. However, I won't pretend this will be cheap or easy." Jake swallowed hard. "We'll do what we have to. I can sell some cattle, maybe a piece of land." Sam jotted another note, then offered a small smile. "Let's not jump to that just yet. We'll start with a formal declaration that Sophia is safe, not missing, and chooses to reside here voluntarily. We file it in county court to show you're both acting under free will. Your father will have to refute that in a public legal forum, which might deter him from using backdoor tactics." A spark of hope flared in Sophia's eyes. "So, I'd basically be going on record that I'm here of my own choice. Then I can fight any claims that I'm incompetent or that Jake abducted me." "Exactly," Sam said. "I can draft those papers tomorrow. You'll both sign. We'll submit them. It won't stop him from trying to come after you, but it'll force a more transparent process." After Sam left, Jake and Sophia shared a moment of cautious optimism. It felt good to have a tangible plan, a path to push back legally. For Sophia, it was the first time she'd stood up against her father with the weight of law on her side. For Jake, it was a step toward preserving his integrity and the farm, while openly defending Sophia's rights. That evening, they retreated to the barn to check on the animals. While feeding the lamb, Sophia stroked its soft wool, reflecting on how much she, too, had grown since coming here. She used to be bound by self-doubt, letting her father's ambitions dictate her future. Now she was forging her own path, even if it was fraught with challenges. Jake watched her, admiration plain on his face. "You know," he murmured, "before you showed up, I was ready to give in. Selling the farm, or at least a big chunk of it, felt inevitable. I'd lost faith in myself." She turned, meeting his gaze. "What changed?" He set down a feed bucket, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You did," he said simply. "Standing up for your own freedom made me reconsider giving up on mine. This land matters to me, and I won't let fear or debt push me off it without a fight." Emotion welled in Sophia's chest, and she found herself leaning against him, the barn's warm light falling across their shoulders. In that quiet space, she recognized how deeply their transformations were intertwined, her courage fueling his, and vice versa. "I never expected to find this sort of strength," she admitted. "I've always relied on my family's resources or my father's decisions. Now, I see there's a power in carving your own path." Jake rested a hand gently against her cheek. "Whatever happens next, we face it together." "Agreed." She nodded, heart swelling with gratitude. "Agreed." Outside, the sky was clear, studded with stars that winked over the dark silhouettes of the pines. The farm, once just a refuge from the storm, had become a crucible for change, where each small victory chipped away at old fears. And though the road ahead was daunting, neither Jake nor Sophia felt alone anymore. They were forging new identities, the farmer rediscovering his resolve, and the heiress claiming her independence. And in that mutual transformation, they found a resilience neither had known they possessed. By the time Sam Willis finished drafting the legal documents, tension around the farm had reached a fever pitch. Rumors flew about Richard Blackwood mounting a fierce legal campaign, Andrew Green lurking in the area, and Michael Harper making visits to the sheriff's office. Every corner of the small town buzzed with speculation, leaving Jake and Sophia feeling both scrutinized and supported. Despite the anxiety, they pushed forward. Sam arranged for them to sign the official declaration at the county courthouse, a small, nondescript brick building in the nearby town. On the day of the signing, Maggie drove them there in her truck, hoping to minimize the chance of anyone tailing Jake's familiar pickup. Inside, the courthouse smelled of old paper and disinfectant. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a slightly harsh glare. Sam greeted them in the lobby, looking composed in a tweed blazer and tie. "Ready?" he asked, voice low. Jake squeezed Sophia's hand. "As ready as we can be." They followed Sam into a modest conference room with pale green walls. A notary public waited behind a wooden desk. The legal forms lay neatly stacked, containing the statement that Sophia was no longer missing, but residing with Jake of her own volition, fully competent and uncoerced. Sophia's heart pounded as she took the pen. A wave of emotion coursed through her. Fear of her father's reaction, pride in her newfound determination, and an undercurrent of relief at finally taking a formal stand. She signed with a steady hand. Jake signed next. A swirl of tension knotted in his stomach. This simple pen stroke felt like he was declaring war on a powerful family, but also solidifying his commitment to Sophia's well-being. If he'd harbored any doubts, they vanished the moment he saw her brave expression. The notary stamped the papers with a resounding click, and Sam neatly tucked them into a folder. "It's done," he said, sounding both satisfied and cautious. "This won't make Richard vanish, but now we can demand he address any concerns through proper legal channels." Sophia exhaled shakily. "It's a start." As they emerged into the parking lot, the bright afternoon sun seemed blinding after the stuffy courthouse. Maggie, leaning against her truck, smiled in encouragement. "Glad you got it done." "Let's hope it slows your father down," Jake nodded, though he remained watchful, scanning the lot for any sign of unfamiliar cars. His wariness proved correct when a sleek, dark sedan pulled in. Instantly, they tensed, though it wasn't Harper or Richard stepping out. Instead, a young woman in business attire approached, stepping swiftly on low heels. "Miss Blackwood?" she inquired, addressing Sophia directly. "I'm Anna Perez, an associate from your father's legal team. May I have a word?" Sophia stiffened. "What do you want?" Anna offered a polite but reserved smile. "Your father wishes to extend an olive branch. He proposes a conversation, just you and him, before this escalates further." Jake was about to protest. but Sophia squeezed his arm, stepping forward. A conversation about what? Anna glanced at the folder in Sam's hand. He's aware you're filing documents declaring independence. He'd prefer a private settlement to avoid public scandal. If you agree to meet, he's willing to hold off any immediate lawsuits against Mr. Miller. Sophia's mind whirled. A private meeting with her father could be risky. He might use emotional manipulation, or worse. But if it spared Jake legal trouble, could she refuse? She set her jaw, lifting her chin. All right, I'll meet with him. But I'm not doing it alone. Sam comes with me. Anna's gaze flicked to Sam. That can be arranged. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., at the Redwood Inn outside town. A neutral place. She pulled out a card. Call me if you want to reschedule. With that, she retreated to her sedan and left, leaving behind a swirl of dust. Maggie shook her head. Feels like a trap. Sam folded his arms. It might be, but it's also a chance to negotiate. If your father sees you won't be bullied, maybe he'll consider a settlement. Jake clenched his fists, tension rolling off him. You sure about this, Sophia? She stared at the business card, heart pounding. No, she admitted quietly. But I have to face him. If there's even a small chance we can resolve this without dragging everyone through court, I owe it to you and myself to try. They headed back to the farm, the upcoming meeting heavy on their minds. That night, neither Jake nor Sophia slept much. The knowledge that they were on the threshold of a final showdown, with the potential to either reach peace or ignite a bigger storm, kept them awake under the flickering glow of a single bedside lamp. Yet as dawn approached, Sophia found herself oddly resolute. This was the path she had chosen. No more running, no more hiding in barns. She would meet her father eye to eye and speak her truth, bolstered by the love and support she'd found here. And in that quiet conviction, she discovered she was no longer just a frightened heiress fleeing a forced marriage. She was a woman determined to live on her own terms. The Redwood Inn sat on the outskirts of town, a modest roadside hotel with a small diner attached. Hardly the sort of place Richard Blackwood would frequent, which only underscored the seriousness of this meeting. Sophia arrived with Sam and Jake by her side. They parked near the far end of the lot to avoid drawing attention. Her stomach churned with nerves as they walked up the cracked concrete walkway to the lobby. Inside, a polite desk clerk directed them to a private conference room. Sophia's heart thudded against her ribs with each step. She'd faced her father on the farm, but this felt different, colder, more formal. They entered to find Richard seated at a rectangular table, Andrew Green on one side and Anna Perez on the other. A pitcher of water and a few glasses sat in the center, untouched. Richard stood as they entered, but his expression was as unreadable as ever. Sophia, he acknowledged stiffly, then nodded at Sam. His gaze rested on Jake with undisguised contempt. Mr. Miller, he added coldly. Jake met his stare without blinking, though his pulse hammered. He refused to be cowed by this man's obvious wealth and authority. Sam placed a leather folder on the table, clearing his throat. We're here at your request, Mr. Blackwood. Let's keep this productive. Richard gestured for them to sit. Of course. He waited for everyone to take their seats, then inhaled. Sophia, you must realize this entire ordeal is damaging for you, for our family's name, and for the business. I propose a settlement. Sophia steeled herself. What kind of settlement? Richard glanced at Andrew, who cleared his throat. Your father is prepared to drop any legal claims against Mr. Miller, cease all searches, and publicly acknowledge you're not missing, on the condition that you return to Seattle and fulfill the engagement. Sophia's stomach twisted, so they wanted her to quietly step back into that corporate arrangement. She stole a glance at Jake, who looked ready to explode at such a suggestion. "No," she said firmly, lifting her chin. "That's not happening." Andrew bristled. "Why are you being so stubborn? Our families need this merger. Your shares in the Blackwood enterprise hinge on our union. Is that worth throwing away?" Sophia swallowed the lump in her throat. "I'm not a bargaining chip, Andrew. I don't care about shares or business deals. I never have. I won't marry someone I don't love just to boost a financial partnership." Richard's face hardened. "You're making an impulsive decision based on what? This farmhand you've known for a matter of weeks. Don't be foolish. When this infatuation fades, you'll regret sacrificing the life we built for you." Jake's jaw tensed. "She can speak for herself." Sophia ignored the jab at Jake's status. She took a breath, summoning courage. "Father, I appreciate what you've done for me over the years, but this is my life. I want control over it. If you truly cared about my happiness, you'd respect my choice." Richard's gaze flicked to Sam. "And this attorney told you to speak to me like this?" Sam raised an eyebrow. "Sophia's quite capable of forming her own views. Let's address the matter at hand. She's filed a declaration stating she resides with Jake Miller by her own free will. Unless you have evidence to the contrary, your legal grounds for demanding her return are slim." Andrew leaned forward. "What about your stake in the company, Sophia? Do you intend to forfeit it altogether?" "That's part of the settlement we're offering. Keep your shares, but fulfill your responsibilities." Sophia paused, the weight of the question pressing down on her. In truth, she'd already distanced herself from that corporate world. The shares, the inheritance, it was all worthless if it meant relinquishing her freedom. She set her gaze on Andrew. "I'm prepared to give it up. All of it, if necessary." Jake felt a surge of surprise and admiration. She was willing to walk away from immense wealth, from a privileged life, to stand by her convictions. Richard's face went pale. "Don't be ridiculous. Those shares are part of your future, your security." She shook her head. "I'll forge my own security." Silence thickened, broken only by the hum of the overhead fluorescent light. Richard seemed almost stunned. Andrew sputtered, exchanging a glance with Anna Perez, who maintained a diplomatic poker face. Finally, Richard spoke, his voice low. "So you'd cast away your inheritance, your place in the company, to live out here in the dirt and debt with this man?" Jake bristled at the insult, but Sophia lifted her chin even higher. "Yes, if that's what it takes to live life on my own terms." Sam cleared his throat, watching Richard carefully. "We propose a mutual agreement. You'll cease any claims of kidnapping or harboring against Mr. Miller. In return, Sophia formally renounces any immediate claim to Blackwood Enterprises, if that's what she wants." Andrew stared at Richard, panic creeping into his eyes. "Sir, we need her shares." Richard lifted a hand, quieting him. For a moment, father and daughter locked eyes. Something seemed to flicker in Richard's gaze, anger, hurt, and a grudging respect. He rose from his seat. "Very well," he said, voice taut. "If you insist on throwing your life away, I won't waste another breath." He drew a breath that shuddered slightly. "I'll have Anna draft the necessary papers. You want your freedom, you have it." In that moment, the tension in the room fractured. A wave of relief flooded Sophia, though it was tempered by the heartbreak of a daughter defying her father. She saw the hurt etched in his features, but she couldn't bend to his will anymore. Andrew clenched his jaw, silently stewing, and Anna began scribbling notes. Sam signaled for Jake and Sophia to stand, indicating their business was concluded. As they left, Richard didn't turn to say goodbye. Sophia's heart ached, but her resolve held firm. She had won her freedom, hard-won and bittersweet. Her father's acceptance might never come, yet she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Jake took her hand as they walked outside into the glaring sunlight. For all the tension and loss inside that conference room, a sense of triumph lingered in the summer air. They hadn't just survived the confrontation, they'd emerged on their own terms, forging a path that was finally theirs to follow. When they returned to the farm that afternoon, a hush settled over the place as if it too sensed the gravity of what had just transpired. For so long, Sophia had lived in a state of fear and uncertainty, navigating threats from her father's emissaries, dodging the private investigator, avoiding the sheriff's suspicions. Yet the legal agreement struck at the Redwood Inn felt like a sudden release of tension. Maggie pulled up a short while later in her pickup, stepping out with cautious hope. "Well?" she asked, scanning Jake and Sophia's faces. Jake slipped an arm around Sophia's waist. "It's over," he said, voice still tinged with disbelief. "Richard agreed not to press charges against me or force Sophia's return." Sophia nodded, exhaling softly. "He's allowing me to live here freely. I'm giving up my shares in the family business, at least for now. It means less financial security than I had before, but it's on my own terms." Maggie's eyes shone with relief. "That's wonderful, dear. I'm so proud of you both." She reached out to give Sophia a tight embrace, then turned to Jake with a warm smile. "You did good, too." Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders, though a faint ache of caution remained. "We still need to see the official paperwork," he noted. "Richard said he'd have his lawyer handle it. There's always a chance he could twist the terms." Sophia, leaning her head against his shoulder, acknowledged that fear. "It's true. Nothing's final until the ink's dry. But I've never seen him back down quite like this. I think he realized forcing me further would bring too much public scrutiny." Maggie clapped her hands together. "Then this calls for a celebration, if only a small one. Let's not wait for the fancy papers. We can open a jar of that jam you've worked so hard on, maybe break out some cider." "You two deserve it." Jake glanced at Sophia, who smiled, her dark eyes finally brimming with a quiet happiness. "I'd like that," she agreed. They gathered in the old farmhouse kitchen, the scene a far cry from the high society parties Sophia once endured. Maggie rummaged through the cupboards, producing a bottle of apple cider, while Sophia fetched one of their best jars of jam from the pantry. Jake sliced some bread and brought out a small block of local cheese. It was nothing fancy, just a humble feast of gratitude shared among dear friends. As they ate and chatted, the conversation flowed with relief and reflection. Maggie reminisced about the first time she'd met Jake's mother, how she'd been taught to preserve berries the Miller way. Sophia joined in, describing the stark differences between her life in Seattle and the heartfelt connections she found here in Oregon. When the sun sank low, bathing the kitchen in warm golden light, Maggie excused herself with a knowing smile. "I'll let you two have some time. You need to breathe and figure out your next steps in peace." She slipped out the door, leaving the farmhouse quiet and still. Sophia turned to Jake, resting her elbows on the kitchen table. "It feels surreal," she confessed, voice hushed. "For weeks, I woke up every morning afraid of being found, dragged back to that world I hated. Now I'm free." Jake reached across the table and laced his fingers with hers. "You earned it," he said softly. "Standing up to your father like that, giving up everything you thought you'd rely on, it took guts." Her gaze fell to their joined hands, and a small smile tugged at her lips. "I never could have done it alone. You showed me there's more to life than power or money. That there's worth in simpler things, in honest work and genuine kindness." Jake felt his chest tighten with emotion. He recalled the day she staggered onto his property, drenched and unconscious, how everything changed in that moment. He'd been isolated, despairing over unpaid bills and the slow decline of his farm. Somehow, in saving her, he'd begun to save himself. "You gave me hope, too," he said, his voice low. I'd started to believe this farm was doomed, that I'd have to sell off the land, but seeing your determination made me want to fight for it again. Sophia's eyes welled with tears. So, where do we go from here? She asked, gently squeezing his hand. He leaned forward, brushing a strand of hair away from her cheek. Wherever we want. We'll rebuild, together. Keep selling jam, fix the fences, bring in new livestock. And if you ever miss the city... She shook her head, a genuine laugh escaping her. I think I'll be okay without skyscrapers for a while. Maybe someday we can take a trip. But for now, this land feels more like home than Seattle ever did. Jake's gaze turned tender. I'm glad. And just so you know, there'll always be a place for you here, with me. A hush settled, carrying the weight of love unspoken. Though the day's victory was incomplete until the final documents arrived, the overwhelming sense was that a new chapter was unfolding, one of shared dreams, forged by hardship and bound by a quiet, powerful bond. A crisp morning fog rolled across the fields as Sophia stepped onto the farmhouse porch. She rubbed her arms, feeling the early chill. Daylight broke softly over the pastures, painting the horizon in pastel hues. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she greeted the day without the dread of being discovered. Jake ambled out behind her, coffee mug in hand. He offered her a second mug, steam rising from its surface. Couldn't sleep, he asked gently. She shook her head. No, I kept thinking about what happens next, how life settles into something normal, I guess. He sipped his coffee, then leaned against the porch railing. We might actually get to experience normal, he replied with a half smile. No more lying to the sheriff, no more ducking private investigators. Sophia smiled, her breath fogging in the cool air. I never thought normal could sound so appealing. They walked out into the yard, passing the rickety old barn that had once been her hiding place. The lamb, now healthy and mischievous, bleated a greeting. Sophia paused to scratch its head, remembering those first days of tending to it, how uncertain she'd felt about her future. Now, that moment seemed like the beginning of a necessary journey, one that had led her back to herself. A faint rumble of an engine drew their attention. Ben's pickup truck rattled up the drive. He hopped out, a grin spreading across his face when he saw them. Heard you two could use a hand, he called, waving a set of tools in the air. Jake chuckled. We can always use a hand. We were just thinking about fixing that fence line by the creek. Ben nodded, unshaven face crinkling with good humor. Well, I'm your guy. But first, he leaned into the truck and emerged with a large manila envelope. Got a delivery from Sam Willis, courtesy of Maggie. She said he asked her to pass this along. Sophia's pulse quickened. The papers? She asked, stepping closer. Ben nodded. Looks official to me. Thought I'd bring 'em right over. She took the envelope, fingers trembling slightly. With Jake at her side, she tore the seal, pulling out a stack of legal documents. The top page bore the header, Mutual Settlement Agreement. Skimming the language, she recognized all the clauses she and Sam had discussed. Relinquishment of her inheritance stake, a statement that she was free to reside wherever she wished, and a promise that no legal action would be pursued against Jake. A wave of relief washed through her, bittersweet and profound. She glimpsed her father's signature at the bottom, confirming that he'd finally yielded. While there was sadness in closing the door on part of her family legacy, there was also undeniable liberation. Jake read over her shoulder, exhaling in relief. So it's done, he murmured. No more threats or suits. Sophia nodded. Looks like it. I'm free, truly free. Ben clapped Jake on the shoulder. Then that calls for a celebration, he declared. Or at least a barbecue once this fence is sorted out. They laughed. the tension that had gripped them for so long lifting at last. With the documents safely tucked away, they set off to work. Jake and Ben loaded the truck bed with new fence posts, hammers and nails, while Sophia grabbed extra gloves and water. The day stretched before them, promising labor but also a renewed sense of peace. At the creek, the three of them worked side by side, driving in posts and stringing fresh wire. The steady cadence of hammer blows resonated through the air, blending with birdsong and the trickling of water. Hours passed in a harmony of labor and conversation, the kind of simple pleasure Sophia realized she'd been missing in her old life of boardrooms and luxury hotels. When the fence finally stood sturdy and straight, Ben wiped sweat from his brow and grinned. "Looks good as new, maybe better." Jake gave an approving nod. "Couldn't have done it without both of you." Sophia leaned against the freshly set post, breathing in the earthy scent of damp soil and pine. She felt a strange mixture of pride and humility, reflecting on how far she'd come since that stormy night. The heavy designer clothes, the stifling expectations, those were relics of a life she no longer needed. Here, battered jeans and a sense of purpose suited her better. Ben headed back to town, promising to return for a small celebration later. Jake and Sophia strolled along the creek, letting the late afternoon sun warm their faces. "You still okay letting go of those shares?" Jake asked quietly. Sophia gave a decisive nod. "Yes. It's worth it to stand on my own 2 feet. Maybe someday my father and I can reconcile, but I won't hold my breath. In the meantime, I'm building something real here." Jake slipped an arm around her shoulders. "We'll build it together." They continued along the water's edge, hand in hand, the newly mended fence behind them, a testament to their own repair and growth. Ordinary life had indeed resumed, but transformed by the trials they had endured and the courage they had discovered in each other. In the following weeks, the story of Sophia's choice and Jake's unwavering loyalty rippled through the small town. Some locals had met the events with skepticism, an heiress giving up her fortune to stay on a struggling farm. Yet most found inspiration in the tale. Maggie suggested that Jake and Sophia come to a community gathering at the church hall, an informal potluck where neighbors often shared news. At first, Sophia hesitated. She still felt self-conscious, uncertain how people might react. But Maggie insisted, "It's time to really integrate," Maggie said, her warm gaze urging Sophia on. "Folks here want to see you as more than a rumor or a scandal. Let them meet the real you." Sophia agreed, and one balmy Saturday evening, she and Jake arrived at the small wooden church hall. Laughter and the clink of dishes spilled into the warm air as they stepped through the door. Inside, long tables were laden with casseroles, salads, pies, each dish a humble offering of community. Ben greeted them with a wide grin, holding 2 plastic cups of lemonade. "We saved you seats," he announced, leading them to a table near Maggie. At every turn, someone waved or smiled politely, curiosity shining in their eyes. When they sat down, Maggie took Sophia's hand. "Don't worry," she whispered. "Just be yourself. They'll love you." Sure enough, it didn't take long for people to approach, curious about the woman who, rumor claimed, had bravely stood up to a tycoon father for the sake of freedom and for a certain kind-hearted farmer. A stout woman in an apron introduced herself as Mrs. Henderson. "Heard you and Jake have some jam that's turning heads at the farm stand," she said brightly. "I'd love to stock some at my little grocery." Sophia's smile lit up. "We'd be honored. We actually have a fresh batch that should be ready soon," others chimed in, complimenting them on how the farm seemed livelier these days. A few asked Sophia about her background. She offered honest but tactful answers, admitting she came from a wealthy family but choosing not to dwell on the drama. She spoke more about the joy she found in rural life, how she never expected to feel so fulfilled planting seeds or feeding lambs. Jake asked for his part, noticed how naturally Sophia's warmth and authenticity shone. She was patient with every question, even when a few neighbors probed a bit too curiously. Instead of retreating, she met them with gentle honesty, describing how she discovered a sense of belonging in this simpler life. The evening wore on with laughter and shared stories. Jake caught sight of the local pastor chatting with Maggie, glancing occasionally at them. He guessed they were discussing how far the runaway heiress had come, but he no longer felt defensive or worried. Tonight, they were just part of the community. As dessert trays circulated, filled with berry cobblers, peach pies, homemade ice cream, a hush fell near the front of the hall. Mrs. Taylor, the town's unofficial event organizer, tapped a spoon against a glass. "Excuse me, everyone," she called, her voice friendly. "I'd like to take a moment to welcome Jake Miller and Sophia, who I hear is soon to be a permanent fixture in our lovely region." Applause rippled through the crowd, and Sophia's cheeks reddened. Jake gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Mrs. Taylor continued, "We know it's been quite a ride for you two, but we're glad you've chosen to make your home here, Sophia. We look forward to many more jars of that delicious jam, and, of course, your presence among us." The applause grew warmer, a genuine outpouring of support. Tears pricked Sophia's eyes. She rose, voice trembling slightly. "Thank you. It means more than you know to be accepted this way. I was worried I might never find a place I fit in. But you all have shown me what real community looks like." The crowd cheered. Jake stood beside her, adding a few words of gratitude for everyone's help during their ordeal, from Ben's mechanical skills to Maggie's unwavering friendship. After the applause settled and people returned to conversations, Sophia and Jake found themselves surrounded by neighbors offering handshakes, welcoming words, and promises of future collaborations. In every exchange, Sophia sensed the unspoken question, why give up a fortune for this small-town life? Her answer, though she seldom voiced it outright, was simple: because here, I'm genuinely seen, not just used. Later, as they helped tidy up the hall, Sophia and Jake shared a look that spoke volumes. By standing up for herself, Sophia had not only freed herself from her father's chains, she'd discovered a community ready to embrace her. And Jake, by defending her at every turn, had also found renewed hope that his farm and his future had worth far beyond the number of acres or the size of his bank account. In helping each other, they'd grown strong enough to help others in return. The lessons they had learned about identity, love, courage, and home were no longer secrets. They were truths shared with a town that had welcomed them both, sealing the bond that began on a stormy night and blossomed under the warm light of genuine human connection. A soft autumn breeze rustled through the fields behind the farmhouse. The leaves on the nearest maple tree had turned a brilliant gold, and the distant foothills glowed with the warm hues of early fall. Jake and Sophia stood on the porch, gazing out at the expanse of land that was now undeniably theirs to shape. It had been several months since the settlement was finalized. Richard Blackwood had honored his word, leaving Sophia in peace. Andrew Green, too, had stepped out of the picture, no longer pestering her about business alliances and arranged futures. Their old world still existed, but Sophia had effectively closed that chapter, forging a new story on this quiet patch of earth. In the intervening weeks, the Miller Farm's jam business had picked up steadily. Locals raved about their preserves, and neighboring towns began placing small orders. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to lighten Jake's financial burdens. Little by little, he paid off overdue bills, fixed up the roof, and purchased a few more livestock. Every so often, a pang of regret for her estranged father surfaced in Sophia's heart. She wished they could have parted on gentler terms, but she understood that, for now, distance was necessary for her growth, and perhaps his. She believed that one day They might find a healthier way to communicate. Stepping off the porch, Sophia tugged on a sweater as the cool breeze caught her. Jake followed, hands comfortably in his pockets. They meandered toward the barn, passing the orchard where a few apple trees had begun to bear fruit. Ranger, Jake's old horse, poked his head over the fence, nickering softly. Pausing at Ranger's side, Sophia stroked the horse's muzzle, recalling the night Jake had discovered her unconscious in the storm, how fragile she had felt then, how uncertain of her future. Yet here she was, forging a life that felt both real and profound. Jake patted Ranger's neck. "He's still as stubborn as ever," he commented, an affectionate grin on his face. Turning to Sophia, he added, "Kinda like you." She laughed softly, stepping closer. "Guess I've learned stubbornness can be a good thing when it's for the right reasons." For a moment, she studied his face, etched with lines from hard work and worry, yet lit by a quiet satisfaction. "Jake, I never thanked you properly." He tilted his head. "For what?" "For risking everything to protect me," she said, her gaze earnest. "You could have turned me in when you first found out who I was. You might have saved the farm sooner with that reward money, but you didn't. You stood by me." He shrugged, a small, tender smile touching his lips. "Turning you in would have been like tearing out a part of me. And honestly, it was never just about saving the farm. It was about doing what felt right. I guess that's how I was raised." Sophia stepped forward until they stood inches apart, the horse forgotten for the moment. She traced her fingertips along the faded plaid of his shirt. "Well, I'm thankful, because that choice changed my life, gave me a chance to find out who I really am." Jake gently lifted her chin, his voice soft. "And who is that?" Her eyes shone with emotion. "A woman who's finally free to choose, who knows what love and community feel like. A woman who's not afraid to get her hands dirty on a farm or stand up to powerful people to claim her own path." "That's quite a woman," Jake murmured, his own eyes reflecting her sincerity. Their kiss felt like a natural extension of that moment, a quiet seal on everything they'd endured and achieved together. The wind carried the scent of apples and hay, the sky overhead shifting to a warm palette of orange and pink as the sun dipped lower. Eventually, they pulled apart, contentment in their faces. They led Ranger to the barn, fed the lamb that still followed them around, and made one more pass through the orchard, checking on the fruit. In every simple task, they found a sense of belonging. When the last rays of daylight disappeared, they headed back toward the house, shoulders brushing in an easy, familiar rhythm. The lamp in the kitchen window glowed, inviting them in. Maggie, Ben, and a couple of other friends were stopping by later for supper, no longer out of worry, but for the shared pleasure of good company. Standing on the porch once more, Jake paused to glance over his land. Sophia slid her arm around his waist, resting her head against his shoulder. The weight of past fears melted into the crisp evening air, replaced by a calm assurance that this was exactly where they both belonged. In that serenely powerful moment, all the threads of their journey came together. The storm that had brought Sophia to Jake's farm, the moral dilemmas they had faced, the love that had grown in secrecy, and the final stand they had taken against Richard Blackwood's demands. The quiet hush of nightfall felt like a benediction, a promise that every hardship had led them here to a place of hope, peace, and genuine happiness. They stepped inside, arm in arm, ready to share a meal with friends and savor the life they had built. And though the future still held its share of unknowns, neither feared what lay ahead. Together, they had found the courage to face any storm and discovered in each other a home that no amount of wealth could replace. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.